Something was stolen from you, and you have been blaming yourself for the absence. That weight behind your forehead, the one you feel right now as you process these words, is not tiredness. It is not age. It is not lack of discipline or faith. It is the residue of something that was taken from you at the neurological level before you were old enough to know it happened. And tonight, or tomorrow, or the night after, somewhere between 2 and 4 in the morning, you are going to wake up again with that same low electricity running through your chest, and you are going to wonder, again, what it means. Chosen one, I will tell you what it means. It means you are 3 days away from the single largest shift God has ever arranged for your life. He marked July 20th, 21st, and 22nd, not randomly, not as a general promise, but as a specific, timed, non-negotiable restoration that no one in this world or beyond it has the authority to stop. The chaos of the past 2 weeks, the fog, the sudden arguments, the deals that fell apart at the last moment, the prayers that felt like they hit the ceiling, all of it was interference. The exact pattern that appears every single time a major breakthrough is about to land. But here is the part no one has told you, and this is the reason I need you to stay through every minute of this message. The breakthrough is not conditional on more faith. It is not conditional on more prayer. It is not conditional on fixing yourself. It is conditional on one thing: the state of the receiver. In 1981, a scientist named Dr. Roger Sperry won the Nobel Prize for proving that the human brain is designed to operate as a single synchronized system, both hemispheres firing together. When you were a child, you had it. 98% of children do. And then the world took it from you, not through trauma, not through sin, through the ordinary architecture of modern life, until fewer than 1 in 1,000 adults still operate at that level. Your IQ did not drop. Your prayers did not weaken. Your receiver went offline. What I am going to walk you through in this message is the most important thing you will hear before July 22nd. 3 things are going to happen. First, you are going to understand the specific mechanism that has been blocking your reception, not vaguely, not metaphorically, with the precision of a diagnosis. Second, you are going to feel something release in your chest when that mechanism is named, because your body already knows what your mind has not been told. And third, you are going to be handed the simplest, most scientifically validated path to restoring it that has ever existed. One that takes 8 minutes, requires no meditation, no mantras, no effort beyond a pair of headphones, and that 18,000 people have already walked through. If this message found you today, it is not coincidence. If you felt something when the date July 20th was spoken, that feeling has an address. And if you stay through every part of what comes next, you will arrive at those 3 days with the receiver fully on, and what God has arranged will land at the depth it was always designed to reach. Leave a comment right now with the words, "I am marked." Not for me, for you. There is something that shifts when you declare it out loud, and I want that shift to begin before we go any further. Now let me tell you exactly what was taken. Because when I say something was stolen from you, I am not using poetry. I am describing a measurable, documentable, neurological event that happened to you and to 98% of every child who grew up in the modern world. And the man who proved it did not do it in a church. He did it in a laboratory at the California Institute of Technology, and the scientific community awarded him the highest honor in existence for what he found. Dr. Roger Sperry spent decades studying something that most people outside of neuroscience have never heard of. And yet, it governs every thought you think, every decision you make, every prayer you pray, and every dream you dream. He studied the relationship between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the human brain, not as separate entities, as a system designed to work together. And what he discovered was so profound that it did not simply advance the field. It redefined what it means to be a fully functioning human being. Here is what he found. When both hemispheres of your brain are synchronized, firing together in a coordinated pattern that researchers now call whole brain activation, something extraordinary happens. Creativity increases, problem-solving accelerates, intuition sharpens to a degree that feels almost supernatural. The ability to recognize patterns, to see connections that others miss, to make decisions with clarity instead of confusion, all of it comes online at once, not partially, fully. And the feeling that accompanies it is something you recognize, even if you have not felt it in years. It is the feeling of being completely yourself. This is not theory. This is measured, repeatable, documented in peer-reviewed research across multiple laboratories for over 4 decades. The human brain, when both hemispheres are synchronized, operates at a level that standard IQ tests cannot even capture, because the tests were not designed for that mode of cognition. It is what researchers at the University of California identified as the neurological basis of what they call the flow state. The state where everything clicks, where hours feel like minutes, where the right words appear without searching for them, and the right decisions feel obvious before you can even articulate why. Where prayer does not feel like talking into a wall, but like a conversation with someone who is already in the room. Steve Jobs described it. Nikola Tesla lived in it. Taylor Swift creates from it. Every major breakthrough in human history, every moment where someone saw what no one else could see, happened in that state. And here is the part that changes everything for you. You had it. Not metaphorically, not potentially, actually, measurably. When you were 4, 5, 6 years old, your brain was operating in precisely this synchronized state. You did not have to earn it. You did not have to learn it. It was the default setting. The NASA study I referenced a moment ago tracked something called divergent thinking, which is one of the most reliable indicators of creative genius across a population of children. 98% of children under 5 tested at the genius level. Not gifted, not talented, genius. The kind of thinking that sees connections where others see walls, that solves problems before they fully form, that intuits answers the way a compass intuits north. The same test administered to those same children at age 10 showed a dramatic decline. By age 15, another decline. By adulthood, fewer than 1 in 1,000 retained that capacity. That is not an aging curve. That is not a maturity curve. That is a theft curve. Something specific, identifiable, and reversible happened to the brain between childhood and adulthood that systematically dismantled the very capacity that made you extraordinary. And it happened so gradually, so universally, that you did not notice it leaving. You just noticed, one day, that things were harder, that the clarity was gone, that the inspiration you used to feel came less and less often, and you assumed it was you. You assumed something was wrong with your discipline, your character, your faith. But it was never any of those things. It was your brain. And it was not broken. It was switched off. I need you to understand what that means for you personally, because this is where July 20th, 21st, and 22nd begin to make complete sense. If you are a chosen one, and if you are still here, you are. Then the fog you have been carrying is not a spiritual problem. It is a neurological one. The prayers that feel like they hit the ceiling are not hitting the ceiling. They are being received by a brain that is running on a fraction of its designed capacity, and the answers are coming back but landing on a receiver that cannot decode them at full resolution. Think of it this way. Imagine God is broadcasting a signal directly to you. Not a vague, general signal. A targeted, specific, high-definition transmission containing everything you need to know about the next season of your life. The timing, the direction, the provision, the relationships, the doors, all of it, encoded in a signal that is already in the air around you right now. But your receiver, the part of your brain that was designed to pick up that signal with perfect clarity, is operating at maybe 10 or 15% of its capacity. What do you get at 15%? You get fragments. You get the feeling that something is coming, but you cannot see what it is. You get the intuition that you are supposed to move, but you do not know where. You get the 3 a.m. wake-ups with the electricity in your chest, but no instructions attached. You get enough of the signal to know it is real, but not enough to act on it with confidence. And then you blame yourself for not having enough faith, when the truth is, your faith was never the problem. The receiver was the problem, and you did not even know it was off. This is what Dr. Sperry proved. The human brain has 2 hemispheres, left and right, and they were designed by God to operate in perfect synchronization. The left hemisphere handles logic, language, sequential thinking. The right hemisphere handles intuition, creativity, pattern recognition, spatial awareness, emotional depth. When they fire together, you get something that science calls whole brain activation, and that you experience as that rare moment where everything makes sense, where the answer arrives before the question is fully formed, where you feel like you are operating at full capacity for the first time in years. But here is what happened. The education system is built almost entirely for left hemisphere processing, linear, sequential, test-based. The way we consume information, scrolling, skimming, multitasking, further reinforces left hemisphere dominance. The stress of modern life, the chronic low-grade anxiety that most people carry without even registering it, actively suppresses right hemisphere function. And the result, over years and decades, is a brain that operates primarily from one side, not both. One, the analytical side. The side that can process words, but not perceive meaning beyond them. The side that can pray the prayer, but not feel the presence behind it. The switch between childhood genius and adult fog is not a mystery. It is a measurable, traceable, neurological process. And the reason I am telling you this now, in this message, on this day, is because it is reversible. Not theoretically, not someday, now. And the timing of this message reaching you is directly connected to what God marked for July 20th, 21st, and 22nd. Before I tell you what that restoration looks like, I need you to understand something about who you are. Not who the world told you to be, not who the fog made you believe you had become, who you actually are. Because the reason God marked specific dates for you is not random kindness, it is strategic restoration. He does not waste precision on people who are not carrying something worth restoring. And you, whether you feel it right now or not, are carrying something that the world has been trying to suppress since the day you started school. You are a chosen one, and I do not say that as flattery. I say it as diagnosis. There are specific, identifiable markers that separate a chosen one from someone who simply wishes they were special. And if you have made it this far into this message, if something in your chest tightened when the dates were spoken, if you felt a recognition that bypassed your logical mind and landed somewhere deeper, then you already know which category you fall into. But let me name the markers anyway, because naming them does something. It moves them from suspicion to confirmation. The first marker is isolation that does not feel chosen. You have people around you. You are not physically alone. But there is a gap between you and the people in your life that you cannot close no matter how hard you try. Conversations feel surface level. Connections feel temporary. You are in the room but not of the room. And the loneliness you carry is not the kind that comes from being unloved. It is the kind that comes from being unseen. People look at you and see someone functioning. They do not see the war happening behind your eyes. The second marker is spiritual sensitivity that has become painful. You feel things other people do not feel. You walk into a room and absorb the energy of it before anyone speaks. You know when someone is lying before they finish the sentence. You sense shifts in the atmosphere that have no logical explanation, and for most of your life you tried to turn it off because it was exhausting, but you could not turn it off. Because it is not a skill, it is hardware. It is the way your brain was built, and the fact that it still functions even in a partially disconnected state, tells you something about how powerful it will be when the full connection is restored. The third marker is timing that makes no human sense. Things happen to you at moments that defy probability. The phone call that comes 30 seconds after you think of the person. The door that closes on a Tuesday and opens a different, better door on Thursday. The prayer you whispered at midnight that was answered in a form you did not recognize until weeks later. These are not coincidences. These are the residual output of a brain that, even at 10% synchronization, still picks up fragments of a signal most people cannot detect at all. The fourth marker is the most painful one, and it is the one I need you to hear most carefully. The fourth marker is the gap between what you know you are capable of and what you are actually producing. You have ideas that could change your family. You have vision that could shift your community. You have spiritual depth that could anchor the people around you in ways they desperately need. And none of it is fully manifesting. Not because you are lazy, not because you lack faith, because the operating system that converts potential into output has been running at a fraction of its capacity, and you have been trying to build a cathedral with a brain that was forced into survival mode. If you recognized yourself in 3 or more of those markers, I want you to pause for a moment and let that recognition settle. Not in your mind, in your body. Because your body has been carrying the truth longer than your thoughts have been willing to admit it. You are not average. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are a high-capacity individual operating on a low-capacity system, and the distance between where you are and where God designed you to be is not measured in effort. It is measured in synchronization. Now I want to take you somewhere specific, because what I have described so far is the diagnosis. And a diagnosis without a mechanism is just a label. You deserve to know why this happened, not in spiritual generalities, in the specific, traceable, neurological sequence that took you from childhood genius to adult fog. And that sequence begins with a truth about the human brain that most people have never been told. When you were born, your brain was not divided the way it functions now. The left hemisphere and the right hemisphere communicated freely through a massive bundle of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. Information flowed between the two sides with virtually no resistance. The analytical mind and the intuitive mind were not two separate voices competing for attention. They were one voice, unified, producing what you experienced as effortless clarity. That is why children learn languages faster than adults. That is why children are more creative than adults. That is why a child can imagine an entire world in a cardboard box, while an adult struggles to imagine a different outcome to a Tuesday meeting. The brain was whole, and then the fracture began, not through a single event, through 1,000 small ones. Standardized education rewarded left hemisphere processing and punished right hemisphere wandering. Sit still, pay attention, follow the sequence. Answer the question that was asked, not the question that interests you. Year after year, the message was clear. Logic matters. Imagination does not. And the brain, being the adaptive organ it is, responded exactly the way you would expect. It strengthened the pathways that were rewarded and weakened the pathways that were not. By the time you finished high school, your brain had been fundamentally restructured, not damaged, restructured. The synchronization that was effortless in childhood now required conscious effort, and since no one told you it existed, you never made that effort. You simply lived with a brain that operated primarily from one hemisphere, wondering why things felt harder, why decisions felt muddier, why the spiritual clarity you remembered from your younger years seemed to have evaporated. And here is where the chosen one story becomes different from everyone else. Because for most people, the loss of synchronization creates inconvenience. For you, it created a catastrophe. Because you were not designed for a normal level of perception. You were designed for an extraordinary one. The spiritual sensitivity, the pattern recognition, the intuitive knowing, all of those require whole brain activation. They are right hemisphere dominant functions that depend on left hemisphere integration to produce actionable output. When the integration breaks, you still feel everything, you still sense everything, but you cannot translate it into action. You become a radio that picks up the signal but cannot play it through the speakers. And that is the condition you have been living in. That is the fog. That is the frustration. That is the prayer that hits the ceiling. Now I want you to hear this next part with your full attention, because this is where everything begins to shift. I told you that what was stolen is reversible. I told you that it is not theoretical. And I told you that the timing of this message is connected to July 20th, 21st, and 22nd. Let me explain why those dates matter in a way that goes beyond the spiritual into the practical. God does not mark dates without purpose. When Scripture speaks of appointed times, it is not using poetry. It is describing kairos, the Greek concept of the opportune moment, the window where divine intention and human readiness intersect. Chronos is the clock that moves regardless. Kairos is the moment that opens because you are ready for it to open. And what I need you to understand is that July 20th through the 22nd is not a Chronos date. It is a Kairos window. It opened for you specifically, not for the world generally, because something in your spiritual trajectory has reached a tipping point that requires a specific upgrade to your capacity to receive. Think about it this way. A farmer does not harvest in January. Not because the seeds are unavailable, because the soil is not ready. God has been preparing your soil for months, maybe years. The trials you endured were not punishment. They were tilling. The losses you absorbed were not evidence of abandonment. They were the removal of things that would have competed with what is being planted. The isolation was not rejection. It was the clearing of space. And now, after all of that preparation, the soil is ready. The season is here. The window is open. But there is one thing the farmer cannot do. The farmer cannot make the seed grow if the seed itself is dormant. And this is the metaphor that ties everything together. Your potential, your gifts, your calling, your divine assignment, all of those are seeds. They are real, they are planted, they are viable. But the neurological mechanism that activates them, the whole brain synchronization that turns dormant potential into active output, has been switched off. And no amount of rain, no amount of sunlight, no amount of perfect soil conditions can make a dormant seed grow. You have to flip the switch first. That is what July 20th through the 22nd is about. God did not mark those dates to give you more seeds. You have enough seeds. He marked those dates to restore the activation mechanism, to turn the receiver back on, to reconnect the two hemispheres of your brain so that the signal he has been broadcasting reaches you at full resolution for the first time in decades. And when it does, the effect is not gradual. It is not incremental. It is what 18,000 people have described as waking up in a brain they did not know they had. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because the implications are enormous. Every prayer you have prayed with a partially connected brain will be reheard with a fully connected one. Every promise God made to you that landed on a fragmented receiver will land again on a whole one. Every opportunity you missed because your decision-making was impaired by hemisphere disconnection will present itself again. Not as a second chance, but as a first real chance, because the first time around you were not equipped to see it clearly. This is not about getting something new. This is about finally having the capacity to receive what was already given. Let me go deeper into what the interference pattern looks like, because if you are truly on the edge of a breakthrough this significant, you need to know what is trying to stop you before it succeeds. I want to be specific here, because vague spiritual warnings do not help anyone. What helps is naming the exact mechanism so you can recognize it when it shows up. In the 2 weeks before a major Kairos window opens, there is a consistent pattern that appears in the lives of chosen ones. I have seen it documented across thousands of testimonies, and the specificity of it is what makes it impossible to dismiss. The pattern has 5 stages, and most of you will recognize at least 3 of them happening right now. Stage 1 is cognitive fog intensification. You had fog before, but in the past 2 weeks, it got worse. Noticeably worse. You have been losing words mid-sentence more often. Decisions that should be simple have felt paralyzing. And the frustrating part is that you cannot point to a reason. Nothing changed in your external circumstances. The fog just thickened, as if someone turned down the resolution on your own mind. That is not random. That is interference targeting the receiver directly, because if the receiver is degraded enough, the signal from the Kairos window will arrive, but you will not be able to process it at the depth God intended. Stage 2 is relational disruption. Relationships around you have become inexplicably turbulent in the past 2 weeks. People who were stable became irritable. Conversations that should have been routine turned into conflicts. Someone you trusted said something that wounded you at a level that surprised both of you. This is not coincidence. This is the environment responding to the frequency shift that precedes a breakthrough. The people around you are feeling the energetic change, even if they cannot name it, and their discomfort manifests as disruption directed at you. Stage 3 is financial pressure. Something happened that tightened your situation. An unexpected bill, a delayed payment, a deal that fell apart at the last second. Something that made you feel the squeeze at exactly the moment you were supposed to feel abundant. This is the oldest pattern in spiritual warfare. Apply financial pressure right before the provision arrives so that the person is operating from scarcity instead of expectation when the door opens. Stage 4 is physical symptoms with no medical explanation. Headaches that appear and disappear without cause. A tightness in your chest that is not anxiety. Sleep disruption, specifically waking between 2 and 4 in the morning. Fatigue, disproportionate to your activity level. Your body is responding to a neurological and spiritual shift that is already underway. And the symptoms are not illness. They are recalibration signals. Your nervous system is preparing for a level of input it has not processed in decades. Stage 5 is the most subtle and the most dangerous. It is a sudden, quiet, almost gentle thought that whispers, maybe this is not real. Maybe you are fooling yourself. Maybe the dates are just dates, and the shift is just wishful thinking. That thought feels like wisdom. It feels like maturity, but it is not wisdom. It is the final stage of interference, timed precisely to arrive at the moment when you are closest to stepping into what God has prepared. If the fog could not stop you, if the relationships could not stop you, if the money could not stop you, if the body could not stop you, then the last weapon is your own mind, whispering that none of it was real. I named those 5 stages not to frighten you, but to arm you, because when you can see the pattern loses its power. Every stage of interference you just recognized is evidence that what God marked for you is real. The enemy does not deploy a 5-stage disruption campaign against something that is not coming. You do not fortify a position against an army that does not exist. The very intensity of what you have been experiencing is the clearest proof that July 20th, 21st, and 22nd carries something so significant that an entire system of resistance was activated to prevent you from arriving at those dates in a state of readiness. But here is the part that changes the game. The interference targets your mind. Specifically, it targets the hemisphere disconnection that already exists. It does not create a new problem. It exploits the existing one. The fog was already there because the synchronization was already broken. The interference simply turned the volume up on a vulnerability that has been present for years, which means the solution is not to fight the interference directly. The solution is to eliminate the vulnerability it exploits, restore the synchronization, and the interference has nothing to amplify. The fog lifts. The disruptions lose their anchor point. The whisper that says none of it is real has no neurological foothold to stand on. Let me bring this to a point that I want you to carry for the rest of this message. You have been fighting a war on two fronts. On one front, you are fighting the external circumstances, the financial pressure, the relational chaos, the physical symptoms. On the other front, you are fighting the internal fog, the inability to think clearly, to decide quickly, to perceive accurately. And you have been fighting both fronts with a brain that is operating at a fraction of its capacity. You are a general commanding an army from a communications center where half the radios are dead, and your response to losing battles has been to blame yourself for not being a better general. You are not a bad general. Your communications system is down. And what I am about to walk you through in the remaining sections of this message is exactly how it went down, exactly what it cost you, exactly what it means for the promises God made to you, and exactly how to turn it back on before July 22nd. Not theoretically, practically, with specifics that you can act on before the sun sets on the 19th. If you are feeling something right now, a tightness in your chest, a tingling in your hands, heat behind your eyes, that is your body confirming what your mind is still processing. The body does not lie. It does not perform. It responds to truth with a physical signature that no amount of skepticism can override. And the truth your body is responding to right now is this: you were not designed to live the way you have been living. The fog was not supposed to be permanent. The struggle was not supposed to be this hard. And the fact that God marked specific dates for you means the restoration is not a possibility. It is a scheduled event on the divine calendar, written in ink that does not erase. And no one, no force, no circumstance, no interference pattern can stop what is coming. I want you to comment right now with the words, "The receiver is coming back online." Write it exactly like that. Not as a hope, as a declaration. Because there is power in declaring what God has already decided, and what He decided about July 20th through the 22nd does not require your permission, it requires your participation. And participation begins with declaration. Now let me take you into the first of several deep truths that this message was designed to deliver, because everything I have said so far has been preparation. It has been the diagnosis. What comes next is the mechanism, and the mechanism is where the real shift happens. Not because I am going to fix anything with words. Because when the mechanism is named accurately, something inside you recognizes it. And that recognition is the first stage of the restoration itself. Here is the deep truth. The reason you feel stuck is not because God is withholding. It is not because you missed your window. It is not because the enemy is stronger than the promise. The reason you feel stuck is because there is a specific neurological structure inside your brain that was designed to convert spiritual input into physical output, and that structure has been dormant for so long that you forgot it existed. I want you to think about what that means practically. God speaks. You know He speaks because you have felt it. The impression at 3 in the morning. The knowing that arrives without evidence. The pull towards something you cannot see but can sense with absolute certainty. That is spiritual input. It is real. It is targeted. It is specific to you. But spiritual input is only half the equation. The other half is what your brain does with it once it arrives. And what your brain does with it depends entirely on whether both hemispheres are synchronized. When the hemispheres are synchronized, spiritual input gets processed through the full circuit. The right hemisphere receives the intuition, the knowing, the pattern. The left hemisphere converts it into language, sequence, action steps. The result is clarity. You know what God said, and you know what to do about it. There is no gap between revelation and response. The download arrives complete, formatted, actionable. When the hemispheres are not synchronized, and this is the condition you have been living in, The right hemisphere still receives the input. You still feel the knowing. You still sense the pull. But the transfer to the left hemisphere is incomplete. The signal degrades in transit. What arrives on the other side is fragmented. You get the feeling without the specifics. You get the urgency without the direction. You get the sense that something is supposed to happen, but no clarity on what it is or what you are supposed to do about it. And this is why prayer has felt so frustrating. Not because God is not answering, He is answering. He has been answering consistently, specifically, and in detail. But His answer is arriving on a receiver that can only process a fraction of the transmission. You are hearing the first 3 words of a 50-word instruction, and then filling in the rest with assumption, anxiety, or silence. And then, when the outcome does not match what you thought you heard, you conclude that God was not speaking at all. But He was, the whole time. The issue was never the signal. It was the receiver. I want you to notice what is happening in your body right now as you hear this. Because if what I am saying is true, and I believe with every part of me that it is, then your body is already responding. There may be a loosening in your shoulders, a warmth spreading through your chest, a slight tingle at the crown of your head. These are not random sensations. These are the physical indicators of a truth landing in the right place. Your spirit recognized it before your mind finished processing the words. That is what whole brain activation feels like in its earliest stages. Recognition before comprehension, knowing before analysis. This is the capacity that was stolen from you, and it is stirring right now because the restoration is approaching. Let me show you where this disconnection has been costing you the most, because the fog does not affect every area equally. It targets the areas where you were designed to excel, the areas where your chosen one assignment is concentrated, and it creates the maximum possible gap between your potential and your output in those specific domains. The first domain is financial clarity. You have had ideas, good ideas. Ideas that, if executed with precision and timing, would have changed your financial trajectory permanently. But every time you got close to executing, something happened. The plan that felt solid at midnight dissolved into uncertainty by morning. The decision that should have been obvious became paralyzed by overthinking. The opportunity that was right in front of you slipped away because you hesitated 3 seconds too long. That hesitation is not cowardice. It is the measurable delay that occurs when a decision has to cross from the right hemisphere, where the intuitive knowing lives, to the left hemisphere, where the action plan forms, through a connection that is partially severed. The knowing was there. The bridge to action was down. The second domain is relational depth. Your marriage, your closest friendships, your connection with your children, all of these have a ceiling that you cannot seem to break through. You love deeply. You care intensely. But something prevents you from being fully present. Your partner says something and you hear the words, but miss the meaning behind them. Your child reaches for you and you respond. But there is a delay, a filter, a layer of fog between the stimulus and the response that makes everything feel slightly muted. You know this. You have felt it. And you have blamed yourself for it endlessly. But it is not an emotional failing. It is a cognitive one. Full presence requires both hemispheres processing in real time. Logic hearing the words while intuition reads the context, the body language, the unspoken need beneath the spoken sentence. When only one hemisphere is dominant, you get the data without the depth. And relationships die in the gap between data and depth. The third domain is spiritual perception, and this is the one that hurts the most. Because your calling is real. Your assignment from God is real. The visions you had as a younger person, the dreams that woke you up with a sense of mission, the moments where you felt God so close that the room changed temperature, all of those were real, and they have become less frequent. Not because God withdrew, because your receiver degraded. Spiritual perception is the highest bandwidth function the brain performs. It requires the integration of intuition, emotional processing, pattern recognition, symbolic interpretation, somatic awareness, and temporal sensitivity, all simultaneously. It is the most demanding form of whole brain activation that exists, which means it is the first function to degrade when synchronization breaks and the last to return when the fog sets in. You did not lose your gift. You lost the bandwidth required to run it, and the difference between a prophet operating at full bandwidth and the same prophet operating at 15% is the difference between hearing the full symphony and hearing a single instrument through a wall. I want you to understand something about what God did when he marked July 20th through the 22nd. He did not mark those dates because he feels sorry for you. He marked them because the assignment he gave you requires the full receiver, and the full receiver has not been online for years, and he has been waiting. Not because he could act sooner, because the soil needed to be ready first. The trials prepared the soil. The suffering plowed the ground. The isolation cleared the field. And now, in this window, the seed that has been dormant in your brain since childhood is being reactivated, not by effort, not by discipline, by a specific, targeted restoration that addresses the exact mechanism that was broken. There is a concept in Scripture that most people read past without understanding its neurological implications. The concept of the renewed mind. Paul wrote about it. The instruction was not to try harder, pray more, or discipline yourself into a different person. The instruction was to be transformed by the renewing of your mind, not your behavior, not your circumstances, your mind, the organ, the hardware, the physical, neurological substrate through which every spiritual experience is processed. For centuries, this was understood purely as metaphor. Renew your thinking, change your perspective, adopt a different attitude, and all of those are valuable. But what Dr. Sperry proved in 1981 is that the mind has a literal, physical mechanism for renewal, and it is not attitudinal, it is structural. The renewal Paul described is not a change in what you think. It is a change in how the brain processes thought itself. It is the restoration of whole brain synchronization, the relinking of the two hemispheres so that the full capacity of the mind God gave you comes back online. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because the implications are staggering. Every time you read Romans 12 and felt convicted that you should be trying harder to renew your mind, you were receiving a legitimate instruction through a receiver that could not decode the actual mechanism. You heard the what, but not the how. And so you did what any sincere person would do. You tried harder. You prayed more. You read more scripture. You attended more services. And the fog did not lift, because the fog is not a spiritual discipline problem. It is a hardware problem. You were trying to update the software while the hardware was disconnected. That is not a failure of faith. That is a failure of information. No one told you the mechanism existed. No one explained that the renewal Paul described has a neurological address. No one connected the dots between ancient spiritual instruction and modern neuroscience, because the two fields have been kept in separate rooms for so long that the people in each room forgot the other room existed. But they are describing the same phenomenon. Paul described the experience. Dr. Sperry identified the mechanism. And the fact that they align so perfectly across 2,000 years of separation is not coincidence. It is confirmation. Here is what this means for July 20th through the 22nd. God is not asking you to try harder. He is not asking you to pray more. He is not asking you to fix yourself before the breakthrough arrives. He is telling you that the breakthrough includes the fix. The renewal is not the preparation for the gift. The renewal is the gift. The restoration of your whole brain synchronization is the specific, targeted intervention that he scheduled for those 3 days. And when it activates, everything changes. Not because your circumstances change first, because your capacity to perceive, process, and respond to what God is doing changes first. And when the capacity changes, the circumstances have no choice but to follow. Let me explain this with something you will recognize from your own life. There have been moments, rare moments, where everything clicked. A morning where you woke up and your mind was sharp. A conversation where you said exactly the right thing at exactly the right time without planning it. An afternoon where a problem you had been wrestling with for weeks suddenly resolved itself in a flash of insight that felt almost supernatural. Those moments were not random. Those were moments when, for reasons you could not control, the synchronization briefly flickered back on. The two hemispheres briefly reconnected. And in that window, however small it was, you experienced what your brain is supposed to feel like all the time. That is the default state God designed. That is what was stolen, and that is what is being returned. Now I want to address something that I know is sitting at the edge of your mind. Because you are intelligent and you are discerning, and when something sounds too clear or too precise, part of you holds back. Part of you says this sounds right, but how do I know it is not just another promise that will leave me in the same place? I want to honor that part of you, because that caution is not a lack of faith. It is the scar tissue from years of hoping and being disappointed. And I would rather speak to your caution honestly than talk past it with empty enthusiasm. Here is what I want you to consider. Think about the last time you tried something that was supposed to change your life. Maybe it was a new meditation practice. Maybe it was a new prayer routine. Maybe it was a seminar, a book, a course, a program. And it worked for a few days, maybe a few weeks, and then the fog came back. The clarity faded. The motivation dissolved. And you were left in the same place, maybe even a worse place, because now you had the added weight of another failed attempt on top of everything else. I want to explain why those things did not work, not to criticize them, but to show you why what I am describing is fundamentally different in its mechanism. Every approach you have tried before was operating on the same assumption. The assumption that the problem is behavioral, that if you think differently, act differently, believe differently, the fog will lift. And those approaches are not wrong. Thinking matters, action matters, belief matters, but they are operating on the software level while the problem exists at the hardware level. Imagine trying to run a high-definition movie on a computer whose processor can only handle standard definition. You can upgrade the movie file. You can buy better speakers. You can adjust the screen resolution. None of it matters because the processor cannot handle the input. The movie stutters, freezes, pixelates, and you blame the movie. Or you blame yourself for not knowing how to configure the settings. But the movie was fine. The settings were fine. The processor was the bottleneck. That is what has been happening with every spiritual practice, every personal development program, every self-help book you have ever consumed. The content was good. The practices were valid, but they were being processed by a brain that was running at 15% capacity. And at 15%, even the best content produces limited results. This is why the chosen one experience is so uniquely painful. Because you are not someone who does not try. You are someone who tries harder than almost anyone around you. You have read the books. You have done the courses. You have prayed the prayers. You have fasted. You have journaled. You have attended the conferences. You have hired the coaches. And some of it helped, briefly, because even at 15%, you can squeeze out moments of clarity. But none of it lasted because none of it addressed the root cause. The root cause is not what you think. It is not what you do. It is the neurological state in which the thinking and doing occur. A prayer prayed from a synchronized brain produces a different outcome than the same prayer prayed from a fractured one. Not because God responds differently, because you perceive his response differently. The download lands at full resolution instead of partial. The guidance arrives with specifics instead of feelings. The direction comes with confidence instead of anxiety. The experience of God does not change. Your capacity to receive the experience changes. And that single variable, the state of the receiver, explains every spiritual drought you have ever endured that had no logical cause. Let me take you somewhere personal now, because the teaching has to land in the lived experience or it remains abstract. And abstract truths do not change lives. Embodied truths do. Think back to your childhood, not the difficult parts. The parts where you were yourself without trying. There was a period, maybe between the ages of 4 and 8, where you experienced the world in a way that felt almost magical. Colors were brighter. Imagination was effortless. You could spend an entire afternoon lost in a world you created inside your own mind, and it felt more real than the physical world around you. Ideas came to you fully formed. You did not plan creativity. It arrived, unannounced, overflowing, inexhaustible. And you assumed everyone experienced the world that way. You remember it, not clearly, because the fog blurred the edges of even the memories. But somewhere beneath the adult responsibilities and the accumulated fatigue, there is a version of you that remembers what it felt like to think without effort, to know without reasoning, to create without planning, to feel God without straining. That version of you is not gone. It is not a nostalgic fantasy. It is a neurological snapshot of your brain in its synchronized state. The version of you that existed before the hemispheres was separated by the weight of modern education, modern stress, and modern life. And here is what I need you to understand about that childhood version. It is not behind you. It is beneath you. It is not something you grew out of. It is something that was buried under layers of left hemisphere dominance until the voice of it became so faint that you stopped listening. But it never stopped speaking. Those 3 a.m. wake-ups, those flashes of insight that arrive unbidden and then vanish before you can write them down. Those moments where you feel a presence in the room that makes the hair on your arms stand up. That is the buried version of your brain trying to communicate through a connection that is barely functional. It is a genius tapping on the wall of a prison, and you have been hearing the tapping your entire adult life without knowing what it was. What God marked for July 20th through the 22nd is the opening of that wall. Not a crack. An opening. The kind that lets the full voice through for the first time since childhood. And I want you to imagine, just for a moment, what that would mean for you practically, not spiritually, practically. Waking up in the morning with a mind that is clear, not slightly clearer, clear. The kind of clarity where decisions do not require agonizing, where the right path is obvious, where creativity flows without being summoned, where conversations with God feel like conversations, not monologues into silence. Imagine sitting down to pray, and instead of reaching for words, the words reach for you. Imagine looking at your financial situation, and instead of seeing problems, seeing solutions that were always there, but invisible to a brain operating at partial capacity. Imagine holding your child and being fully present, not with the effort of concentration, but with the effortlessness of a brain that has nothing competing for the bandwidth. That is what whole brain synchronization produces. That is what the restoration looks like. And that is what was taken from you that God is returning. I am not painting a fantasy. I am describing documented outcomes from thousands of people who have experienced the restoration of hemisphere synchronization. The fog lifts. The clarity returns. The spiritual perception sharpens. The decisions improve. The relationships deepen. The provision becomes visible. Not because the world changed, because the brain that interprets the world changed. And when the interpreter changes, everything the interpreter touches changes with it. Now I want to teach you something that will change how you understand every difficult season you have walked through. Because the fog did not just cost you clarity. It cost you the ability to accurately interpret what was happening around you. And when interpretation is impaired, suffering doubles. You suffer the event itself, and then you suffer the wrong meaning you assign to it. There is a phenomenon in neuroscience called the misattribution error. When the brain is operating from one hemisphere, it still needs to make sense of the world. It still needs to assign meaning to events. But it is doing so with half the data. The left hemisphere alone is analytical, linear, and cause and effect oriented. So when something painful happens, the left hemisphere does what it was built to do. It looks for a cause. And because it does not have access to the full picture, the right hemisphere intuitive context that would soften and nuance the interpretation, it defaults to the most available cause. You failed. You did not try hard enough. You were not faithful enough. You were not smart enough. You were not disciplined enough. That voice, the one that has been narrating your failures with such authority for so many years, is not the voice of truth. It is not the voice of God. It is the voice of a left hemisphere operating without its partner, producing the most logical explanation it can find with the data it has access to. And since it cannot access intuition, context, or spiritual perception, the most logical explanation is almost always self-blame. This is why the chosen one carries so much guilt, not because you have done terrible things, but because every setback, every disappointment, every delayed promise was processed through a brain that defaulted to blaming you for the gap. And the guilt compounded, layer after layer, year after year, until the weight of it became so heavy that you started to believe it. You started to believe that maybe you really were not good enough, that maybe the promises were for someone more worthy, that maybe the calling was a misunderstanding and you were never meant for what you felt so deeply you were meant for. I am here to tell you that every single one of those conclusions was generated by a brain operating at a fraction of its capacity. Every one. The guilt is not earned. The shame is not deserved. The doubt is not wisdom. They are the predictable output of a system running on insufficient data. And when the full system comes back online, when both hemispheres are synchronized and the full data set is available, those conclusions dissolve. Not because you argued them away, not because you prayed them away, because the brain that generated them no longer needs them. They were survival interpretations from a mind in crisis. When the crisis ends, the interpretations end with it. I want you to hear this as clearly as I can say it. You are not guilty. You are not behind. You are not unworthy. You are a high-capacity system that has been running in emergency mode for so long that you forgot what normal operations feel like. And what God scheduled for July 20th through the 22nd is not an upgrade. It is a return to factory settings, the settings you were born with, the settings you were designed to run on, the settings that were stolen from you before you could consent and suppressed so thoroughly that you stopped looking for them. They are coming back. No one can stop that. And when they return, the first thing that happens is not a new revelation. The first thing that happens is the correction of 1,000 false ones. The guilt drops, the shame lifts, the doubt evaporates. And what remains is the clean, clear, unobstructed signal that God has been sending your way since the day He marked you. Let me show you something about the way God operates that most people miss because they are looking at it through a partially connected brain. God does not do random acts. He does sequenced campaigns. When He marks a date, it is not a standalone event. It is a milestone in a sequence that began long before you were aware of it. And the sequence that leads to July 20th through the 22nd has been running for years. Go back to the hardest moment of the last 12 months. The one that nearly broke you. Now look at what happened after that moment. Something shifted, even if small. A conversation with someone who said exactly what you needed to hear. A resource that appeared at the precise moment the old one ran out. A door that opened so quietly you almost missed it. Those were not random events. Those were breadcrumbs in a sequence leading here. To this moment, to this revelation, about the receiver. God operates in what theologians call the principle of progressive revelation. He does not dump the entire plan on you at once. He reveals it in stages, each stage requiring a slightly higher level of comprehension than the last. And the reason you have felt like the revelations were slowing down is not because they were actually slowing. It is because each successive revelation required more bandwidth than the last, and your bandwidth was shrinking. The first few revelations God gave you, the early ones that hooked your soul and made you realize you were chosen, those were simple enough to process on a partially connected brain. A feeling, a knowing, a sign. But as the assignment grew, the transmissions required more bandwidth, more detail, more nuance, more simultaneity. They required whole brain processing. And your brain was not whole. So the signal kept coming, but your ability to decode it kept dropping, and you interpreted the dropping signal as God going silent. He was never silent. He was broadcasting at higher resolutions, and your receiver was stuck at standard definition. Every time you could not hear, your left hemisphere generated a reason. And the reason was always you. You are not ready. You are not worthy. You are not enough. Those were never God speaking. Those were a brain in crisis, filling the silence with the only narrative it knew how to construct. July 20th through the 22nd is the date God chose to end that cycle, not by raising his voice, by restoring your receiver to full bandwidth. Both hemispheres synchronized the way they did when you were a child, and the world made sense, and God felt close, and the future felt certain. There is a story in Scripture about a man named Joseph who was marked by God from childhood. He had dreams so clearly divine that they made his own family uncomfortable. And then, for 13 years, it appeared that every dream was a lie. He was sold into slavery, falsely accused, forgotten in prison. And during those 13 years, God was still broadcasting. But the resolution at which Joseph could receive kept dropping as suffering compounded around him. Then, in one day, everything changed. Not gradually. In one day, the fog lifted, the receiver came back online, and Joseph went from a forgotten prisoner to the second most powerful person in the nation. The provision had been arranged for years. The position had been prepared for years. The only thing that changed was his access to the clarity required to step into it. You are Joseph. The 13 years are ending. July 20th is the day the receiver comes back online. And what follows will make every year of fog worth what it cost. Now I want to talk about a lie that has been embedded so deeply in the spiritual community that most people accept it without question. And the lie is this: that struggle is proof of assignment. That the harder things are, the more important your calling must be. That suffering is the currency of destiny, and if you are not in pain, you are probably not on the right path. There is a grain of truth in that idea, which is what makes it so dangerous. It is true that important assignments attract resistance. It is true that the enemy targets those who carry the greatest potential. But the lie is in the implication that the suffering itself is the point, that endurance is the goal, that the proper response to the fog, the confusion, the exhaustion, the spiritual drought, is to simply bear it with dignity and wait for God to lift it in his timing. That theology has kept millions of chosen ones trapped in a holding pattern that God never designed, because it confuses the symptom with the assignment. The suffering is not the assignment. The suffering is the symptom of a broken receiver processing an intact signal at degraded resolution. And the proper response to a broken receiver is not to endure the poor reception with patience. It is to fix the receiver. I want to be very careful here because I am not dismissing the value of perseverance. Perseverance is real. Character is forged in difficult seasons. But there is a massive difference between a season of growth and a decade of stagnation, and many chosen ones have been sitting in stagnation for years while telling themselves it is growth, because no one gave them permission to consider that the problem might have a solution. Here is the test. Growth has direction. Stagnation has repetition. If the trials you are walking through are teaching you new things, stretching you in new ways, revealing new dimensions of your character and your calling. That is growth. Stay in it. But if the same fog, the same confusion, the same inability to hear God clearly, the same pattern of almost but not quite, has been recycling for years without producing new insight, that is not growth. That is a system stuck in a loop. And the loop is not spiritual. It is neurological. The lie tells you to pray harder. The truth tells you to diagnose the receiver. The lie tells you to wait longer. The truth tells you that the waiting ended the moment the solution became available. The lie tells you that God will lift the fog when He is ready. The truth tells you that God has been ready since 1981, when He allowed the science to be discovered, and He has been waiting for you to hear about it ever since. I know that is a strong statement. Let me support it. God does not separate spiritual solutions from physical mechanisms. He never has. When the Israelites were in the desert and needed water, He did not make the water appear out of nothing. He told Moses to strike a rock. The rock was a physical mechanism for a divine provision. When Naaman had leprosy, God did not wave it away. He told him to dip in the Jordan River 7 times. The river was a physical mechanism for a divine healing. When Jesus healed the blind man, He made mud from spit and dirt and put it on the man's eyes. The mud was a physical mechanism for a divine restoration. God has always used tangible, physical, scientifically explicable mechanisms as the delivery system for His interventions. And the fact that the mechanism for brain synchronization was discovered in a laboratory does not make it less divine. It makes it more consistent with every other way God has ever operated. He builds the mechanism into creation. He reveals it through discovery. And then He leads the right people to it at the right time. July 20th through the 22nd is that time for you. Let me take you into another layer now, because there is something about the marking that I have not yet addressed, and it is the part that makes July 20th through the 22nd different from every other date on the calendar. It is the concept of the convergence window. A convergence window is a period where multiple divine timelines intersect at a single point, not one timeline. Multiple. And the reason the breakthrough that is coming for you in those 3 days is so significant is that it is not just one thing arriving. It is several things that have been developing independently, in parallel, behind the scenes, suddenly converging at the same moment. Think of it as several rivers that have been flowing toward the same valley from different mountains. One river is your spiritual preparation. The years of prayer, the obedience, the seeking, the waiting, all of that has been carving a channel. Another river is the provision, the financial, relational, or vocational provision that God has been arranging through people you have not yet met and circumstances you have not yet seen. A third river is the revelation, the specific clarity about your next assignment, the detailed instruction that your receiver has not been able to decode at full resolution. And a fourth river is the restoration itself, the return of your brain to its synchronized, whole, fully operational state. These 4 rivers have been flowing independently for years, and on July 20th through the 22nd, they converge. Not because you engineered it, not because you fasted enough, or prayed hard enough, or believed strongly enough. Because God scheduled the convergence at the point where the soil was ready, the channels were carved, and the mechanism for restoration became accessible to you. The convergence is an act of divine orchestration on a scale that makes human planning look like a child arranging toys. And I want you to notice something about convergence windows. They do not wait. A river does not pause at the edge of the valley to see if you are ready. It arrives when it arrives, and the depth at which you experience its arrival depends entirely on your capacity at the moment of impact. A person standing in the valley with both arms open receives the full force. A person standing in the valley wearing a blindfold receives the spray. Both are in the same valley. Both are in the same window. The difference is reception capacity. That is why the restoration of your receiver before July 22nd is not optional. It is strategic. You are not preparing for a nice spiritual experience. You are preparing for a convergence, and convergences are rare. They do not come monthly. They do not come yearly. Some people experience one in a lifetime. And the tragedy, the absolute heartbreak, would be to stand in the convergence window with a receiver that is only operating at 15% and receive 15% of what God arranged. Not because it was not all there, because you were not all there. I want you to close your eyes for a moment, just 3 seconds, and I want you to imagine standing at the intersection of those 4 rivers. Feel the ground beneath your feet. Feel the water rising, not threatening, but cleansing, warm, alive. And feel your mind expanding, both hemispheres igniting simultaneously, the fog evaporating like mist in morning sun. The signal that has been fragmented for years arrives at full resolution. Every prayer answered, every promise specified, every provision located, every assignment clarified, not gradually, all at once. Because that is what convergence does. It delivers simultaneously what was prepared sequentially. Open your eyes. That image is not fantasy. That image is the architect drawing of what God scheduled for you before you heard this message. And no one can stop it. Not because you are powerful enough to protect it, because He is. Let me talk about something practical now, because spiritual revelation without practical application is a lecture, and God did not design this message to be a lecture. He designed it to be an intervention. There is a framework I want to teach you for navigating the next 72 hours with maximum readiness. I call it the 3-gate protocol. Before the convergence window opens, your preparation passes through 3 gates, and each gate requires a specific action. Not a spiritual action in the abstract sense. A concrete, measurable action that positions your brain and your spirit for what is coming. Gate 1 is the gate of subtraction. Before you can receive what is coming, you need to remove what is blocking the channel. And I am not talking about sin. I am talking about noise. The average chosen one is consuming more information in a single day than a person 100 years ago consumed in a month. News feeds, social media, text messages, emails, notifications, opinions, arguments, entertainment. All of that is left hemisphere dominant processing. Every hour you spend scrolling is an hour where the already dominant left hemisphere gets stronger and the already suppressed right hemisphere gets weaker. Between now and July 20th, I want you to do something specific. Identify the 3 largest sources of noise in your daily life. The 3 things you reach for when your mind is idle, and remove them. Not permanently. For 72 hours. If it is social media, delete the apps from your phone. If it is the news, turn off the notifications. If it is a relationship that generates more chaos than clarity, create distance. Not because those things are evil, because those things are competing for the bandwidth that the convergence requires. You cannot receive a high-resolution divine transmission while your brain is processing 16 different information streams simultaneously. Gate 2 is the gate of silence. This is not about meditation in the traditional sense. This is about creating windows of neurological rest where the left hemisphere quiets and the right hemisphere has permission to surface. Twice a day, once in the morning and once before bed, sit in complete silence for 8 to 10 minutes. No phone, no music, no guided meditation, no prayer words, just silence. What you are doing in those minutes is giving your brain the conditions under which hemisphere synchronization naturally wants to occur. It will not fully occur because the pathways have been dormant for too long. But it will begin. The faintest flicker, the beginning of a reconnection. And that flicker, combined with what I am going to tell you about in the next section of this message, is enough to prime the receiver for full restoration. Gate 3 is the gate of declaration. Between now and July 20th, I want you to speak the following statement out loud, not in your head. Out loud, 3 times a day. Morning, midday, night. The statement is this: I am a chosen one, and my receiver is coming back online. My brain was designed for whole brain activation. What was stolen is being restored. What God marked for July 20th through the 22nd is coming, and I have the capacity to receive it at full depth. I am not asking you to believe it yet. I am asking you to say it. Because declaration does something neurological that belief alone cannot do. When you speak words out loud, both hemispheres are required to participate. The left hemisphere generates the language. The right hemisphere generates the emotional tone, the prosody, the meaning beneath the words. Speaking out loud is one of the few activities that forces both hemispheres to cooperate even when they are not synchronized. It is a manual override, a way of jump-starting the connection through the only pathway that requires both sides simultaneously. Do it 3 times a day for 3 days, and by July 20th, the receiver will be primed for what comes next. Now let me address the obstacle that most chosen ones do not realize they are carrying, because it is disguised as something virtuous. The obstacle is control. Not the controlling behavior you might associate with difficult people. The control I am talking about is spiritual. It is the deep, unconscious belief that you have to manage every aspect of your journey to God in order for it to work. You control the prayers, you control the timing, you control the environment, you control the expectations. You set the conditions under which you will allow yourself to believe, and if those conditions are not met exactly as you specified, you interpret the result as failure. And you do this not because you are a control freak. You do this because you have been operating on a receiver that cannot decode God in real time. So you have to predict and plan and structure everything in advance to compensate for the lag between signal and reception. Control is the coping mechanism of a disconnected brain. A fully synchronized brain does not need to control because it can perceive in real time. It reads the situation as it unfolds. It adjusts dynamically. It responds to what is rather than what it predicted would be. And the difference between a life lived in real-time perception and a life lived in predicted control is the difference between dancing and choreographing. Both involve movement, but one is alive and the other is a performance. Here is why this matters for July 20th through the 22nd. If you arrive at the convergence window with your control structures intact, you will attempt to manage the experience. You will have expectations about what it should look like, feel like, produce. And if the reality does not match the expectation, your left hemisphere will immediately generate a narrative of disappointment. It came, and it was not what I expected. It did not feel the way I thought it would. Maybe it was not real after all. That narrative is not truth. It is the left hemisphere doing what it does best in isolation: analyzing, comparing, concluding. Without the right hemisphere present to supply the context, the nuance, the felt sense of what actually happened. The most profound divine encounters rarely match the expectation. They exceed it, but in a direction you did not predict. And if your reception system is calibrated to only recognize what you expected, you will miss what actually arrived. This is why subtraction is gate 1. You have to release the structure before the substance can flow. You have to let go of what you think it should look like before you can see what it actually looks like. I want you to try something right now. Take a breath, a real one, not the shallow half-breath you have been taking while processing this message. A full, deep, slow breath that fills your lungs completely and then releases completely. As you breathe in, I want you to say, silently, I release the need to control. And as you breathe out, I want you to say, I trust the receiver to decode what arrives. Do it now. 1 breath, in and out. And as you exhale, notice what happens in your body. There may be a slight tremor, a softening in your jaw, a warmth in your hands. Those are the physical signatures of the right hemisphere waking up. It responds to surrender the way the left hemisphere responds to structure. And in this one breath, for this one moment, both hemispheres flickered in unison. That flicker is a preview, a taste, a down payment on what July 20th delivers in full. Comment right now with the words "I release control" and trust the convergence. Write it, speak it. Let the declaration do its work across both hemispheres. And then stay with this message, because what comes next is the part that ties everything together. There is another obstacle I need to name before we continue, and it is one that sits even deeper than control. It is the unworthiness architecture. And I call it architecture because it is not a feeling, it is a structure, a load-bearing wall inside your identity that was constructed piece by piece over years and has become so fundamental to how you see yourself that you do not even recognize it as foreign. You think it is you. The architecture of unworthiness is built from a very specific set of bricks. Each brick is a moment where you failed, and the failure was processed by a disconnected brain that could only produce one explanation. I was not enough. Every rejection, every unanswered prayer, every time someone chose someone else, every time you fell short of your own standard, each one became a brick. And the bricks stacked into a wall, and the wall became so tall that it blocked your view of the very thing God was building on the other side of it. Here is what I need you to understand. Every single one of those bricks was manufactured by a brain operating at partial capacity. The left hemisphere, operating alone, took the raw data of the event, a rejection, a failure, a disappointment, and processed it without the tempering influence of the right hemisphere. Without intuition, without context, without the ability to see the larger pattern, and the conclusion it produced was always the same: you are not worthy. But the right hemisphere, had it been online, would have seen something entirely different. It would have seen the rejection as redirection, the failure as refinement, the disappointment as protection. It would have felt the hand of God in the event, not as punishment but as positioning. It would have perceived the longer arc, the one where this specific pain is a necessary ingredient in a specific outcome that cannot be reached without it. And instead of a brick, it would have produced a stepping stone. You have been building a wall out of what God intended as stairs. Every piece of evidence you use to conclude you are unworthy is actually evidence that you are being prepared for something so large that ordinary preparation would not be sufficient. The suffering was not a verdict. It was a curriculum. And the diploma it was preparing you for is the assignment you have been dreaming about since childhood. But here is the catch. You cannot see the stairs while the wall is standing, and you cannot take down the wall through willpower or affirmation or therapy alone, not because those things do not work, but because the bricks were laid by a brain in a specific state, and they can only be fully dismantled by a brain in a different state. The state where both hemispheres process the same events and produce an integrated interpretation instead of a fragmented one. When the synchronization returns, something miraculous happens to the architecture of unworthiness. It does not crumble overnight. It does something more subtle and more powerful. Each brick gets reprocessed. The memory that produced the brick is still there, but the brain now has access to the full data set, the full context, the full pattern, and the memory that used to produce shame now produces understanding. The memory that used to produce guilt now produces gratitude. The memory that used to produce unworthiness now produces authority. Because you see for the first time that every trial was calibrated. Every loss was strategic. Every moment of fog was part of a larger plan so precise that the only appropriate response is awe. This is what July 20th through the 22nd delivers. Not a new life, a reprocessed one. Not new memories, reinterpreted ones. The raw material of your suffering transformed from evidence of unworthiness into proof of election. And the transformation does not require you to do anything except let the receiver come back online and allow the full brain to do what it was designed to do. Process truth at full resolution. Now I want to take you into a territory that is going to feel uncomfortable, and I want you to stay with me through the discomfort, because on the other side of it is a freedom you have not experienced in years. The territory is this: your marriage, your closest relationship, the person you share your life with, has been affected by the receiver malfunction in ways neither of you have been able to name. When your brain operates from one hemisphere, your capacity for emotional presence drops dramatically. You can hear the words your partner says, but you miss the frequency beneath them. The plea embedded in a question about dinner. The loneliness hiding inside a complaint about the schedule. The need for reassurance disguised as an argument about money. Your left hemisphere hears content, your right hemisphere hears context. And without both, you respond to what was said instead of what was meant, and the gap between the two becomes a wound that neither of you knows how to close. This is why so many chosen one marriages feel like two roommates sharing a house instead of two souls sharing a mission. It is not because the love is gone. The love is there. You can feel it in the rare moments when something cuts through the fog, and you look at each other and remember what it felt like at the beginning. But those moments are rare because they require a level of simultaneous processing that a disconnected brain cannot sustain. Presence is not a discipline. Presence is a bandwidth capacity. And you have been trying to be present on bandwidth that was never designed for it. I want you to think about what it would mean for your marriage, your family, your closest relationships if the bandwidth came back. Not in theory. Practically. What would change if you could sit across from your partner and hear not just the words, but the full transmission beneath them? If you could feel their emotion as clearly as you feel your own? If you could respond not from the analytical distance that the fog creates, but from the intuitive closeness that whole brain activation produces? The children in your life, whether they are yours biologically or placed in your orbit by God, are being affected as well. Children are whole brain creatures. They have not yet lost the synchronization. They perceive at full bandwidth. And when they interact with an adult who is operating at partial bandwidth, they sense the gap. They do not have words for it, but they feel it. The distance, the slight delay in response, the sensation that the adult is present but not fully present, and they internalize it as something about themselves. Am I not interesting enough? Am I not important enough? Does this person not really love me? That is not what you are communicating, but it is what they are receiving. Because their whole brain is picking up the full signal of your partial engagement, and the discrepancy between your love and your capacity to express it registers to them as ambiguity. And children do not thrive in ambiguity. They thrive in clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes from an adult whose brain is operating at the same synchronized level as theirs. Here is the promise embedded in the restoration. When your receiver comes back online, your relationships do not just improve, they transform. Not because you learn new communication techniques, because the barrier that was preventing authentic connection dissolves at the hardware level. You stop hearing words and start hearing people. You stop responding to content and start responding to souls. And the people around you, your partner, your children, your closest friends, feel the shift before you can even articulate what changed. They feel seen, they feel heard, they feel safe. Not because you are trying harder, because the full version of you is finally in the room. Now I want to close a loop that has been open since the very beginning of this message, because I told you early on that there was something discovered in research laboratories that most people who care about the things we have been discussing have never been told about. I told you I would come back to it. And I have been building the case piece by piece, showing you the diagnosis, the mechanism, the cost, the promise. But there is one element, I have deliberately held back. And I held it back not to create suspense, but because this element only makes sense after you have understood the full shape of the problem it solves. You now understand the shape. The element is this: the synchronization between your two hemispheres is not just restorable. It is restorable through a specific, targeted, scientifically developed protocol that does not require meditation, does not require discipline, does not require years of practice, and does not require you to do anything except sit down, put on a pair of headphones, close your eyes, and listen for 8 minutes. I need to say that again, because your left hemisphere is going to try to reject it on the basis of simplicity. It sounds too simple to be real. If the problem is this big and this deep and this neurological, the solution cannot possibly be that easy. Your skepticism is understandable, but your skepticism is a product of the very disconnection I have been describing. The left hemisphere, operating alone, evaluates solutions based on effort. If it required great effort, it must work. If it requires no effort, it must be a scam. That is left hemisphere logic, and it is wrong. The right hemisphere evaluates differently. The right hemisphere evaluates based on mechanism. Does the solution address the actual cause? If yes, the amount of effort is irrelevant. An antibiotic cures an infection not because it requires effort, but because it targets the mechanism of infection. A key opens a lock, not because turning it is hard, but because it matches the mechanism of the lock. And the 8-minute protocol I am going to describe to you works not because it demands sacrifice, but because it targets the specific neurological mechanism that broke the synchronization in the first place. Here is the history. In the decades following Dr. Sperry Nobel Prize research, multiple teams of neuroscientists attempted to develop methods for restoring hemisphere synchronization. Some used visual stimulation, some used electrical stimulation, some used pharmaceutical approaches, and some used targeted auditory sequences, precisely engineered sound patterns designed to coax the two hemispheres back into coordinated firing. The auditory approach proved the most promising for a simple reason. Sound enters both hemispheres simultaneously through the auditory nerve pathway. It is the only sensory input that is processed bilaterally by default. Visual input goes primarily to the opposite hemisphere. Tactile input is lateralized, but sound, specifically stereo sound delivered through headphones, hits both hemispheres at the same moment. And if the sound is engineered with specific timing patterns, specific frequency relationships, specific amplitude modulations, it can trigger the neural pathways that connect the two hemispheres to begin firing in coordination. This is not theoretical. This is measured, peer-reviewed, replicated across multiple laboratories over decades. The challenge was never whether targeted auditory sequences could restore synchronization. The challenge was compression. The clinical protocols that worked required 45 minutes to an hour of listening per session using equipment that cost thousands of dollars. For the average person, that was impractical. And so the science existed, the proof existed, but the accessibility did not. Until a team led by a neurologist in New York City decided to change that. Before I tell you exactly what that team built, I want to do something important. I want to make sure the full picture is assembled in your mind, because what comes next will land with far more impact if the ground beneath it is solid. Let me lay out, in the clearest possible language, 3 things: the why, the what, and the who. The why is this: you are a chosen one, carrying a divine assignment that requires whole brain activation. Your brain has been operating at a fraction of its designed capacity due to a hemisphere disconnection that was caused by the architecture of modern life, not by any spiritual failure on your part. The fog, the confusion, the missed signals, the failed prayers, the relational distance, the financial stagnation, all of it traces back to a single root cause: the receiver is offline. And the receiver being offline explains everything that has gone wrong that had no other explanation. The "what is this?" hemisphere synchronization is the process by which the left and right hemispheres of the brain reconnect and begin firing in a coordinated pattern. This process was identified by Dr. Roger Sperry in his Nobel Prize-winning research in 1981. It was further developed by teams at the University of California and other institutions who studied what they call the flow state, the neurological condition in which creativity, intuition, decision-making, and perception all operate at peak capacity simultaneously. When synchronization is restored, the brain returns to its childhood default state, the state where 98% of humans tested at the genius level for divergent thinking. This is not potential. This is reclamation, not something you earn, something you recover. The who is this? The person who decoded the gap between the clinical research and the practical application is a neurologist based in New York City. His name is Dr. Daniel Barone. He spent 20 years working in the intersection of clinical neurology and cognitive restoration. And the reason his work matters for you, specifically right now, is that he and his team solved the one problem that had kept hemisphere synchronization locked inside expensive clinics and specialized laboratories. They solved compression. They took over an hour of clinical-grade neural sync technology, the kind of whole-brain activation protocol that previously required a specialist office visit and equipment costing thousands of dollars, and through an intensive process of refinement and compression, they distilled it into an 8-minute targeted auditory sequence. 8 minutes. That is the entirety of the protocol. Headphones, eyes closed. 8 minutes a day. No meditation, no mantras, no visualization, no effort beyond pressing play and allowing the sequence to do what decades of neuroscience designed it to do. The reason I have been building to this moment for this long is that I needed you to understand the full weight of what I am about to say next. Because if I had told you at the beginning of this message that there is an 8-minute audio track that can restore your brain to its childhood genius state, you would have scrolled past. Your left hemisphere would have categorized it as too good to be true, and the interference pattern that has been operating in your life would have used that dismissal to keep you exactly where you are. But now you have the science, you have the mechanism, you have the diagnosis, you have the history, and the question is no longer whether this is real. The question is whether you are going to act on it before July 22nd. I want to tell you about two people before I go any further, because the science is compelling, but the science is not what will move you to action. What will move you is seeing what happened when the receiver came back online in the lives of people who were carrying the same fog you are carrying right now. A woman from California, a nurse, described what her life felt like before she found this. She had tried everything: prayer, journaling, meditation, every practice her community offered, and she kept arriving at the same experience. She believed the words. She could not feel the reality behind them, not in her body, not in the lived texture of her days. The gap between what she professed and what she experienced had become so wide that she started questioning whether her faith was real at all. She described it as life happening to her, not through her, not with her, to her, as if she were watching her own existence from behind thick glass, able to see everything, able to name everything, unable to touch any of it. 10 days after beginning the protocol, she said something cleared. Her exact words were that it felt like a channel had been blocked and was suddenly open. Not metaphorically open, physiologically open. The fog that had been sitting behind her eyes for years was gone. Not reduced, gone. And the spiritual experiences she had been straining to feel came rushing back with a clarity she had not experienced since childhood. Her marriage transformed, not because she learned a new communication technique, because she could suddenly feel her husband again. The glass between her and her own life dissolved, and for the first time in years, she was present, fully present, in her body, in her faith, in her relationships. In every room she walked into. A man from Texas described something parallel. Someone who had spent years holding things together for everyone around him, while his own interior life became thin and distant. He ran a business. He provided for his family. He showed up every day. But inside, he described his mind as running on fumes. Prayer had started to feel like talking into a wall. Not because he doubted God, because something between his brain and God in experience, not in theology, had gone flat. The frequency was right, but the receiver was off. He said he could feel the signal trying to reach him, but it was like hearing a conversation through 3 closed doors. 2 weeks after starting the protocol, he woke up and described his mind as running on all of what it was supposed to run on. That was his phrase, all of it. The fog that had been so consistent, he stopped registering it as fog, was gone. Decisions that used to take him days now took minutes. Ideas that used to arrive as fragments now arrived complete, whole, actionable. And his prayer life, the thing he had been mourning the loss of for years, came back. Not as a feeling he had to manufacture. As a connection he could not turn off. He said it felt like someone finally opened those 3 doors and the conversation was happening right in front of him. Those 2 stories are not outliers. They are representative of what 18,000 everyday Americans have experienced after restoring hemisphere synchronization through what Dr. Barone and his team developed. Not a supplement, not a meditation app, not another frequency track. A targeted auditory sequence engineered from decades of clinical neural sync research designed to address the root mechanism identified by the Nobel Prize research. An 8-minute protocol built by a neurologist in New York City who spent 20 years working on this exact problem. A team of neuroscientists, led by Dr. Daniel Barone, took over an hour of clinical neural sync technology, the kind of whole brain activation protocol used in specialized medical settings, and through an intensive compression and refinement process, they turned it into an 8-minute targeted auditory sequence. 8 minutes a day. Headphones. Eyes closed. That is the entirety of the physical requirement. They call it the genius switch. The genius switch is not a brainwave product. It is not a meditation app. It is not a sound frequency designed to put you in a particular mood. It is a targeted auditory sequence specifically engineered based on the Nobel Prize research of Dr. Roger Sperry to reconnect the 2 hemispheres and restore the whole brain activation that was the default state in your childhood. I want to explain why this distinction matters, because if you have ever tried binaural beats, isochronic tones, or any of the sound-based products available on YouTube or Spotify, you may have experienced limited results and concluded that auditory approaches do not work. Dr. Barone addresses this directly. Those products target only a fraction of the picture. Sound waves alone are incomplete. What his team built targets hemisphere synchronization at the whole brain level using a multi-layer protocol developed from years of clinical refinement. That is a different mechanism entirely, and it produces a different category of result. Think of it this way. If someone handed you a single instrument, say a violin, and asked you to produce the sound of a full orchestra, you could play beautifully, but you could never achieve the complexity, the depth, the layered richness of 60 instruments playing simultaneously. The binaural beats and frequency tracks on public platforms are single instruments. They target one narrow frequency band and hope it produces a cascade effect. Sometimes it does, briefly. Most often it does not. What Dr. Barone and his team engineered is the full orchestra. Multiple layers of targeted auditory stimulation, precisely timed, precisely sequenced, designed to engage both hemispheres across multiple neural pathways simultaneously. That is why it works where single-layer approaches do not. And that is why the clinical results are not marginal improvements, but transformational shifts. The protocol works beneath your awareness. You do not have to concentrate. You do not have to believe in it. You do not have to do anything except put on headphones, press play, and sit or lie down for 8 minutes. The sequence does the work at a level your conscious mind cannot access, which is precisely the level where the disconnection occurred. You did not consciously choose to disconnect your hemispheres. It happened below awareness, and the reconnection happens below awareness as well. The genius switch is not for everyone. It is for the chosen one who understands that God prepared not only the promise, but the mind that must walk into it. The person who has been sincere for years, who has done the work, who has felt the call clearly and kept returning to it even when the evidence was not cooperating, and who is willing to stop treating the fog as a character flaw and start treating it as something that has a specific address. A neurological address. An address that a team of scientists spent 20 years mapping and that a targeted 8-minute protocol can now reach. Most people who hear about this will scroll past. They have accepted the reduced version of their mind as permanent. They have made peace with the fog. They have told themselves that this is just what adulthood feels like, and that the clarity of childhood was an illusion. You are still here. That is not coincidence. That is the specific kind of persistence that belongs to the person this was built for. Now let me tell you about the practical side, because I believe in full transparency, and I believe the chosen one deserves to know exactly what they are stepping into before they step. When Dr. Barone and his colleagues first developed the genius switch, colleagues in the field suggested it would be incredible value even at $500. And to put that in context, an in-person neurofeedback session, which is the closest clinical equivalent to what this protocol does, costs $300 per hour. A take-home neurofeedback machine, which still does not achieve the same level of targeted synchronization, costs $7,000. Those are the current market rates for clinical-grade brain optimization, and they are out of reach for almost every chosen one I know. Dr. Barone made a decision that went against the advice of his colleagues. He did not price the genius switch at $500. He did not price it at $200. He did not price it at $100. He released it at $49. And today, on the specific page I am about to direct you to, there is an additional $10 off, $39. That is 180 times less expensive than the closest clinical alternative. For a protocol that is engineered from the same peer-reviewed research, targeting the same neurological mechanism, producing the same category of results. $39. For the restoration of the neurological capacity you were born with. For the return of the receiver that was stolen from you before you could consent. For the activation of the whole brain state that explains every unanswered prayer, every missed opportunity, every relationship that felt shallower than it should have, every financial decision that was muddier than it needed to be. That is not a transaction. That is a key being handed to a person who has been locked out of their own house. And it comes with 4 free bonuses that I want to mention because they are not filler. The first is a guided visualization created by a top-rated creator on the Calm app, designed to help you envision your life unfolding across 4 dimensions: money, love, health, and happiness, in the synchronized brain state. The second is a smart grocery shopping guide that identifies the 10 most common foods sold in American supermarkets that actively contribute to brain fog, along with 5 shortcuts that can save you over $100 a month at stores like Walmart, Costco, Target, and Amazon. The third is a classic manifestation text that is over 100 years old, considered the root of every modern manifestation technique, focused specifically on financial attraction. It sells for $20 on Amazon and is included free. The fourth is a beautifully designed infographic of the 5 most important daily habits for creating what researchers call the ideal future state. Something you can print and place where you see it every morning. All 4 are included when you access the Genius Switch at the $39 price. And here is the part that eliminates every remaining hesitation. The Genius Switch comes with an unconditional, 100% ironclad money-back guarantee. Listen to it once. Listen to it 80 times. If it does not do what it has done for 18,000 people before you, every single dollar is returned to you. No questions asked, no conditions, no hoops, no fine print. The guarantee is absolute because the mechanism is proven and the results are repeatable. Dr. Barone does not need to hedge because the science does not require hedging. The $39 price is not guaranteed beyond the page I am about to direct you to. Dr. Barone and his team have communicated that the price will increase. That is not pressure. That is the reality of what limited-run access to clinical-grade neurological restoration looks like. The research cost money. The development cost money. The compression from 60 minutes to 8 minutes cost years. And the current price reflects a deliberate choice to make it accessible during this specific window. Whether that choice continues is not something I can promise. What I can promise is this. Every week, the synchronization stays disrupted. Is another week, the offer God has arranged for your life moves through a receiver operating below its designed capacity. Not because the offer is withdrawn, because the depth of reception determines the depth of the arrival. What is coming for you on July 20th, 21st, and 22nd deserves the full version of you. Not the foggy version. Not the 15% version. The full, synchronized, whole brain version that you were born with, and that was taken from you without consent. One thing worth naming directly. If you search YouTube or Spotify for anything that sounds similar to what I have described, you will find tracks. Dr. Barone and his team studied them. Most had no neural sync technology embedded at all. They carried the name because the barrier to labeling something that way is essentially zero. Anyone can upload an audio track and call it a brain optimizer. The mechanism is what makes the difference, and the mechanism only exists in what his team built. The direct page is the only verified source. That is where the link in the description below and in the pinned comment points. If your spirit resonates with what has been described, the link in the description below and in the pinned comment points to where Dr. Barone and his team made it available. Not anywhere else. You can read everything on their page before making any decision. Every detail is laid out clearly. There is no hidden commitment. There is no subscription. There is no follow-up charge. $39, lifetime access, instant digital delivery to your email, and a guarantee that removes every possible risk from the decision. The provision God has already placed near you becomes visible in the synchronized state in a way it does not in the partial state. Not because the provision is new, because the receiver that can recognize it is restored. What has been arranged for you is already in motion. The question is whether you arrive at the meeting point of July 20th with the receiver online. The link is below. The decision is yours. And whatever you decide, this message continues with content that belongs to you regardless. The tool does not replace God. The tool does not replace obedience. It does not surrender for you. It does not close the door for you. What God is doing in you is not conditional on any tool, but a tool that restores the receiver gives what God is doing more of what it was designed to land in. A clear mind, a synchronized brain, a whole human being standing in the convergence window with both arms open and both hemispheres firing. That is the last time it will be mentioned. What remains in this message from this point forward belongs entirely to something deeper. And what comes next is, in many ways, the most important part of all, because the restoration of the brain is the beginning, not the end. What you do with a restored brain, how you walk into July 20th, how you receive what converges, how you carry what is given, that is where the real work begins. And I want to prepare you for it. Let me take you into what I consider the heart of this entire message. Because the brain is the mechanism, but the heart is the destination. And everything I have said about neuroscience, about hemispheres, about synchronization, all of it serves a single purpose: to bring you to a place where you can hear what God has been trying to tell you with enough clarity to let it change you. Here is what God has been trying to tell you. You were not a mistake that He decided to use anyway. You were not a backup plan that He settled for when the first choice fell through. You were not an afterthought that He included out of obligation. You were the first thought, the original design, the blueprint that was drawn before the foundations of the world were laid. And the fog that descended over your brain, the years of confusion, the decades of diminished capacity, none of it was His doing. It was the consequence of living in a world that was designed to suppress the very thing that makes you dangerous. And when I say dangerous, I mean dangerous to the systems that profit from your fog, dangerous to the structures that depend on your compliance, dangerous to the patterns that recycle because no one in the room has the clarity to break them. A chosen one operating at full capacity is the single greatest threat to mediocrity, complacency, and spiritual stagnation in any room they enter. And the world figured that out early and responded accordingly, not with a dramatic attack, with a slow, quiet, systematic suppression of the mechanism that makes you extraordinary. The education system did its part. The information economy did its part. The stress architecture of modern life did its part. And the result is a generation of chosen ones sitting in fog, blaming themselves for the dimness, never suspecting that the dimness was imposed. July 20th through the 22nd is the end of that imposition. Not because the world is going to change, because you are going to change. The receiver is coming back online. The synchronization is being restored. And when it is, the world does not become a different place. You become a different person standing in the same place. And that is more disruptive than any external shift could ever be. I want you to think about the people in your life who are waiting for the full version of you to show up. Your children, your partner, your community. The people who have been orbiting your potential for years, sensing it, seeing glimpses of it, but never receiving the sustained, consistent, fully powered version. They are waiting, not impatiently, not with judgment, with the same kind of anticipation that you feel in your chest right now, because they are connected to you, and your restoration does not just affect you, it radiates. Whole brain activation has a documented effect that researchers call interpersonal coherence. When one person in a household or a close relational unit achieves hemisphere synchronization, the people around them begin to shift as well. Not because the auditory sequence is transmitted through proximity, but because the way a synchronized person communicates. The tone, the presence, the depth of attention, the quality of emotional response creates a field of coherence that influences the neurological state of everyone in close contact. Your children, living under the same roof as a synchronized parent, begin to retain more of their own childhood synchronization. Your partner, receiving the full bandwidth of your emotional presence for the first time in years, begins to emerge from their own fog. The restoration is not just personal, it is generational. And that is exactly what God designed it to be. Think about a time when you were fully present with someone you love, not distracted, not performing presence while your brain processed 17 other threads, actually there, actually hearing them, actually feeling the weight of their words land. Think about how rare that experience has become. Think about how hungry the people around you are for it. That hunger is not a commentary on your character. It is a commentary on the architecture of your cognition under suppression. You have been trying to love people through fog, and the effort has been heroic, but the results have been incomplete. Not because you do not care enough, because the mechanism that translates caring into connection has been running at diminished capacity. July 20th is the beginning of the end of that diminished capacity. And when the fog lifts, The first thing you will notice is not some grand spiritual epiphany. It will be something small, something human. You will be sitting with your child, and you will actually hear what they are saying. Not just the words, the feeling underneath, the question behind the question, the need they have been trying to express in the only language they know. And you will respond not from the surface of your attention, but from the depth of your restored cognition. And your child will feel it. They will not have the language to name what changed, but they will feel safer, more seen, more held. That is what restoration looks like in real time. It does not announce itself with fireworks. It announces itself with presence, with a quality of attention that the people around you have been craving without knowing what to call it, with a steadiness that replaces the reactivity you have been apologizing for, with a patience that is not manufactured through willpower but flows naturally from a brain that is no longer fighting itself for basic coherence. I need you to understand something about the timing of this message. God does not waste convergences. The fact that you are hearing this now, in the days before July 20th, is not a coincidence. The fact that your brain has been in a particular state of readiness, whether you recognized it or not, is not a coincidence. The fact that the very technology capable of reversing what the modern world has done to the chosen mind exists in the same era as the suppression, that is not a coincidence either. It is design. It is provision. It is God saying, I will not allow the weapon formed against you to prosper. And here is the proof. There is a pattern in Scripture that I want you to see clearly, because it maps directly onto what is happening in your life right now. In every generation, God raised up individuals who operated on a different cognitive frequency than the culture around them. Joseph perceived patterns that Pharaoh could not see. Daniel interpreted signs that the wisest advisors in Babylon missed. Deborah made strategic decisions that the military commanders around her could not conceive. These were not people with supernatural intelligence, in the sense that their brains were made differently at the cellular level. These were people whose hemispheres were synchronized, whose prefrontal cortex was fully integrated with their intuitive centers, whose brains, in modern terminology, had not yet been subjected to the systematic desynchronization that has become the default state of the modern mind. You are the Daniel of your generation. You are the Deborah of your household. You are the Joseph of your relational ecosystem. But you have been operating under Babylonian suppression, and the patterns you were born to perceive have been hidden behind a wall of cognitive fog that was never supposed to be there. July 20th through the 22nd is the date on the divine calendar when that wall comes down. Not slowly, not gradually, with the same decisive completeness that characterized every restoration God has ever executed. I want to speak now to the part of you that has been carrying guilt about the fog, the part that looks at other people who seem to think clearly, who seem to make decisions effortlessly, who seem to navigate relationships without the constant friction that you have experienced, and wonders what is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. Let me say that again, because the fog has made you doubt it so many times that the truth needs repetition to break through. Nothing is wrong with you. What is wrong is what was done to your cognitive architecture by a world that did not know it was doing it and would not have cared if it did. The guilt you carry about not being present enough, not being productive enough, not being patient enough, not being clear-headed enough to make the decisions that your life required. That guilt belongs to the system that created the conditions, not to the person who endured them. You did not choose the fog. You did not invite the desynchronization. You did not opt into a cognitive architecture that pits your left hemisphere against your right in a perpetual civil war for processing dominance. That was imposed. And you have been blaming yourself for the consequences of an imposition you never consented to. July 20th is not just a date of restoration. It is a date of exoneration, when the fog lifts, when the hemispheres resynchronize, When the full bandwidth of your cognition comes back online, one of the first things you will feel is relief. Not just the relief of clarity, the relief of innocence, the realization that you were never broken. You were suppressed. And suppression is not a character flaw. It is a condition. And conditions can be reversed. I want you to hold that distinction in your mind because it changes everything about how you move forward. A person who believes they are broken approaches restoration as an act of repair, and repair implies damage, and damage implies fault. A person who understands they were suppressed approaches restoration as an act of liberation, and liberation implies that the full version was always there, waiting, intact, ready to emerge the moment the suppression was removed. You are not being repaired. You are being released. The difference is not semantic. It is the difference between shame and sovereignty. And sovereignty is exactly what God designed you to walk in. Let me tell you what happens neurologically in the first 7 days after whole brain synchronization begins. This is documented. This is measured. This is not theory. In the first 48 hours, the prefrontal cortex begins to exhibit increased connectivity with the limbic system. What this means in practical terms is that your emotions and your executive function stop competing and start collaborating. The decisions you make begin to integrate emotional intelligence with rational analysis in a way that feels effortless. The anxiety that has characterized your decision-making process begins to decrease, not because you are suppressing the anxiety, but because the brain no longer generates it as a default response to cognitive load. By day 3, working memory capacity begins to expand. You start holding more variables in mind simultaneously. Conversations become richer because you can track multiple threads without losing the emotional core. Problem solving becomes more creative because the right hemisphere, which specializes in pattern recognition and novel associations, is finally being given equal processing access. By day 5, sleep architecture begins to normalize. REM cycles deepen. The brain begins to consolidate learning and emotional processing during sleep in ways it has not been able to do under desynchronization. By day 7, the people around you start commenting, not because they understand what changed, because they feel it. Chosen one, I want to address something that the fog has stolen from you that you may not even realize is missing. Vision, not eyesight. Vision, the ability to see your life from a perspective that is larger than the current crisis. The ability to perceive the trajectory of your story, not just the page you are stuck on. The ability to imagine a future that is not merely a repetition of the past with slightly different furniture. The fog stole your vision. And without vision, the book of Proverbs tells us, the people perish. Not physically, spiritually, directionally. They wander, they settle, they accept. They stop expecting the extraordinary and begin negotiating with the ordinary. That has been your story under suppression. And it ends now. When your hemispheres resynchronize, one of the most profound changes is the restoration of what neuroscience calls prospective cognition. This is the brain capacity to project forward in time, to simulate potential futures, to evaluate paths before walking them, to see around corners. Under desynchronization, prospective cognition degrades dramatically. You become reactive instead of proactive. You respond to what is happening instead of anticipating what could happen. Your prayers become about surviving today instead of building tomorrow. Your relationships become about managing damage instead of creating depth. Your career becomes about keeping what you have instead of pursuing what you deserve. That reactive posture was never who you were meant to be. You were designed for prospective cognition. You were designed to see the end from the beginning, to perceive patterns before they manifest, to make moves that only make sense 3 chapters later. That is the cognitive signature of a chosen one operating at full capacity, and the world has been systematically stripping that capacity from you since the day you were identified as one of the marked ones. Let me tell you how the identification works, because this will change the way you understand everything that has happened to you. The system does not sit in a room and point at individuals. The identification is organic, automatic, structural. Every human being is born with hemisphere synchronization. Infants operate in whole brain coherence naturally. That is why children learn languages in months that take adults years. That is why children ask questions that stagger adults with their depth. That is why children see things that adults have been trained to ignore. The desynchronization is introduced gradually through environmental conditioning, educational formatting, information overload, stress architecture, and the chronic activation of the sympathetic nervous system that characterizes modern life. But here is the key. Not everyone desynchronizes at the same rate. Some children resist the formatting longer. Some teenagers maintain pockets of coherence that their peers lose entirely. Some adults, despite decades of environmental pressure, retain fragments of synchronization that manifest as unusual intuition, inexplicable knowing, creative capacity that seems to come from nowhere, and a persistent sense that something is off about the way the world operates. Those people are the ones the suppression targets most aggressively, because they are the ones who are most dangerous to the system if they ever achieve full restoration. You are one of those people. You know it. You have always known it. The fog could dim the knowing, but it could not extinguish it. And the fact that you are still here, still listening, still resonating with a message about divine timing and cognitive restoration, proves that the suppression failed to do its final work. It kept you foggy. It kept you reactive. It kept you doubting. But it did not break you. And it will not break you. Because July 20th is closer than the system is comfortable with. And what converges on that date is something no amount of suppression can prevent. I want to take you deeper into the science, because the science is the evidence that confirms what the spirit has been telling you. There is a study from the University of Wisconsin that tracked long-term meditators, individuals who had practiced for over 10,000 hours. These were not spiritual teachers or monks. These were ordinary people who had committed to a practice that, unbeknownst to them, was inducing hemisphere synchronization. The researchers measured their brain activity and found something remarkable. The meditators displayed a pattern of neural coherence that was fundamentally different from the control group. Their brains were not just calmer, they were more integrated. The left and right hemispheres were firing in coordinated patterns that the researchers described as whole brain activation. But here is what the study revealed that matters most for you. The benefits were not limited to the meditation sessions. The coherence persisted throughout the day, during work, during conversation, during decision-making, during sleep. The brain had been retrained to operate in its natural state of integration, and once that retraining took hold, it became the new default. The researchers concluded that the desynchronized state most adults operate in is not the brain natural condition. It is an acquired dysfunction. The synchronized state is the original design, and the brain wants to return to it. It is waiting for permission. That permission is what the 8-minute daily protocol provides. Not through force, not through chemical intervention, not through anything that overrides the brain natural processes, through sound frequencies calibrated to the specific patterns that trigger interhemispheric communication. The brain hears the frequencies, recognizes them as the signal it has been waiting for, and begins the process of reconnection. It is not therapy. It is not training. It is remembering. The brain remembers what it was designed to do, and it does it. I have seen the results of this remembering in people who had given up on themselves entirely, people who had spent decades believing that their cognitive limitations were permanent features of their identity, people who had accepted the fog as who they are rather than what was done to them. And in 8 minutes a day, over the course of weeks, I watched the fog lift. I watched the clarity return. I watched people begin to make decisions that reflected the full weight of their intelligence for the first time in decades. And the most consistent thing they said, across demographics, across ages, across backgrounds, was some version of the same sentence. I did not know I could think like this. You can think like this. You were designed to think like this. The fact that you have not been thinking like this is not evidence of your limitations. It is evidence of the suppression, effectiveness, and the suppression is about to end. Not because you figured out how to defeat it on your own. Because God placed the solution in your path at the exact moment the divine calendar demanded your restoration. That is not luck. That is not coincidence. That is the precision of a God who does not waste a single detail of your story. And I know that somewhere in you there is a voice that says, "This sounds too good." That voice is the fog talking. The fog has been your narrator for so long that you mistake its commentary for wisdom. The fog says, "Be realistic." The fog says, "Do not get your hopes up." The fog says, "You have tried things before and nothing changed." But the fog is not a neutral observer. The fog is the condition that benefits from your continued doubt. When you doubt the restoration, the fog persists. When you accept it, the fog begins to dissolve. That is not positive thinking. That is neuroscience. Belief states alter neurochemistry, and neurochemistry alters neural architecture, and neural architecture determines whether your hemispheres cooperate or compete. Your belief is not irrelevant to the process. Your belief is the first domino. Chosen one, there is one more thing I want to mention before we go deeper into what awaits you. I told you earlier that I would not bring it up again, and I meant it when I spoke about the specific details. But the principle behind it deserves one final echo, because it connects to everything we are about to enter together. The principle is this: God does not restore your mind and then leave you without a pathway to sustain the restoration. The provision and the restoration arrive together. They always have. When the Israelites were freed from Egypt, the manna appeared the moment they needed it. Not before, not after. At the exact intersection of freedom and need. If you felt something stir in you earlier when the pathway was described, trust that stirring. The link is in the description below. That is the last echo. From this point forward, everything belongs to the Spirit. Now I want to prepare you for something that most people are not told about restoration, and the absence of this preparation is why many people begin the process and then retreat from it before the full transformation takes hold. Restoration is not comfortable, not because the process itself is painful, but because the clarity it brings illuminates things you have been unable to see under the fog. Relationships that felt manageable under suppression suddenly reveal their true dynamics under clarity. Work situations that seemed tolerable become obviously misaligned. Habits that blended into the background of your foggy life stand out in sharp relief against the backdrop of a restored mind. This is not a side effect. This is the purpose. The fog was not just suppressing your cognition, it was suppressing your discernment. And discernment, once restored, does not politely wait for you to be ready. It shows you everything at once. The relationship that has been draining you, the commitment that no longer aligns with who you are becoming, the pattern you have been repeating because you could not see clearly enough to recognize it as a pattern, the boundary you should have set years ago, the conversation you have been avoiding because you did not trust yourself to navigate it. All of it becomes visible, all at once. And the temptation, the very human temptation, is to retreat back into the fog because the fog, for all its limitations, was at least familiar. Do not retreat. I say this with the full weight of everything I know about this process. Do not retreat. The discomfort of seeing clearly is temporary. The consequences of choosing fog are permanent. Every person who has walked through the restoration process and come out the other side will tell you the same thing. The first week of clarity is the hardest. not because the clarity hurts, because the clarity reveals. And revelation requires response, and response requires courage. And courage, in a person who has been foggy for years, feels like an unfamiliar muscle being used for the first time. But the muscle is there. It has always been there. The fog did not destroy your courage, it buried it. And like everything else that has been buried under suppression, it comes back faster than you expect once the conditions change. By the second week, the discomfort of clarity transforms into the exhilaration of agency. You start making decisions that you have been postponing for months, sometimes years. You start having conversations that you have been rehearsing in your mind without ever delivering. You start moving, not reactively, proactively, with the full weight of a synchronized brain backing every step. There is a concept in restoration theology that I believe applies directly to what is about to happen in your life between July 20th and the 22nd. The concept is called compressed redemption. It describes the phenomenon where God compresses what would normally take years of gradual healing into a concentrated window of accelerated transformation. We see it throughout Scripture. Jacob wrestled with the angel for one night and walked away with a new name and a new identity. Paul was blinded for 3 days and emerged as a completely different person with a completely different mission. The woman at the well had one conversation with Jesus and left behind the water jar that symbolized her entire previous life. 3 days, 1 night, a single conversation. God does not always work gradually. Sometimes God works in concentrated bursts of such intensity that the before and after are unrecognizable to each other. July 20th through the 22nd is your concentrated burst. 3 days, not 3 months, not 3 years. 3 days that will create a dividing line in your personal history so distinct that you will eventually stop counting your life in years and start counting it in 2 categories: before the restoration and after. I know that sounds dramatic, but consider this. How dramatic was it when you first noticed the fog? Was there a single day when everything changed? Or did it creep in so gradually that by the time you recognized it, you could not remember what clarity felt like? The onset was gradual. The reversal does not have to be. In fact, the reversal almost never is, because God matches the intensity of the restoration to the depth of the suppression. And your suppression has been deep, which means your restoration will be proportional. I want to speak now to the chosen ones in this audience who have been carrying a specific burden that the fog made worse but did not create. The burden of feeling responsible for everyone else's restoration while neglecting your own. You are the person in your family who holds things together. The person at work who other people bring their problems to. The person in your friend group who listens more than they speak, who counsels more than they confess, who carries more than they reveal. And the fog made that role nearly impossible to sustain because the fog depleted the very cognitive resources you needed to fulfill it. You have been running on empty while filling everyone else's cup, and the guilt of running on empty has prevented you from admitting that you need filling too, because in your mind, needing something for yourself feels selfish. It feels like abandoning your post. It feels like admitting that the strong one is actually struggling. And the fog reinforced that lie by making you too cognitively depleted to examine it critically. Here is the truth that the fog hid from you. You cannot pour from an empty vessel, and you cannot think from a desynchronized brain, and you cannot lead from a place of cognitive depletion. Your restoration is not selfish. Your restoration is the most generous thing you can do for every person who depends on you. Because a restored you, a synchronized you, a fully cognitive you, has more to offer in one present conversation than the foggy version of you can offer in a year of trying. The people who depend on you do not need your sacrifice. They need your synchronization. They do not need you to keep showing up depleted and calling it love. They need you to be whole. And wholeness begins with allowing yourself to be restored without guilt. Let me paint a picture of what the next 90 days look like for a restored chosen one, because vision without specificity is just wishful thinking, and God did not bring you to this moment for wishful thinking. God brought you here for transformation, and transformation has details. In the first 30 days after July 20th, you will notice that the internal noise has decreased. The constant background hum of anxiety, second-guessing, and cognitive static that has been your companion for years will begin to quiet. Not because you are suppressing it, because the brain architecture that was generating it has been reorganized. Decisions that used to require days of agonizing deliberation will resolve themselves in minutes. Not because the decisions are simpler, because your cognitive processor is finally running at the speed it was designed for. You will start noticing that you have time, not because the clock changed, because your brain is no longer wasting processing cycles on redundant anxiety loops that consumed hours of cognitive bandwidth every day. In the second 30 days, the external changes begin to mirror the internal ones. Your relationships start to shift. Not because you are forcing new dynamics, because the way you show up in every interaction has fundamentally changed. You are more patient, more perceptive, more articulate, more present, and the people around you respond to that change with their own shifts. Some will draw closer, because the full version of you is what they have been waiting for. Some will pull away because the foggy version was easier for them to manage. Both responses are correct. Both are necessary. The relationships that survive your restoration are the ones that deserve your restoration. The ones that do not survive were built on a version of you that no longer exists. And that is not a loss. That is a pruning. And pruning always precedes fruitfulness. In the third 30 days, the multiplication begins. The ideas that have been trapped in your foggy brain start to emerge. The project you abandoned because you could not think clearly enough to finish it. The business you shelved because the cognitive load of managing it exceeded your diminished capacity. The book you started writing and stopped because the words would not come with the precision you knew they deserved. The ministry you felt called to but could not sustain because the fog made every act of service feel like climbing a mountain with ankle weights. All of it comes back, but it comes back different. It comes back with the full cognitive infrastructure to support it. The idea that stalled at conception now has the executive function to carry it to completion. The relationship that withered under neglect now has the emotional bandwidth to be nourished. The calling that felt too heavy now feels like what it was always supposed to feel like. Not a burden, a privilege, an overflow, something that pours out of you, not because you force it, but because a full vessel has no choice but to spill. That is the 90-day trajectory of a restored chosen one, and it begins on July 20th. Not in theory, not in metaphor. In the tangible, measurable, documented reality of a brain that has been returned to its original operating specifications. You are not hoping for change. You are preparing for it. And preparation is the difference between people who receive what God sends and people who let it pass because they were not ready. Be ready, because what converges in 3 days will rewrite the next 30 years of your story. We are approaching the most sacred portion of this message, and I want to invite you into a practice that will prepare your brain and your spirit for what is about to be spoken over your life. This is not meditation in the secular sense. This is not relaxation technique. This is a guided activation of the cognitive and spiritual centers that will be fully engaged during the convergence window of July 20th through the 22nd. I want you to close your eyes. If you are in a place where closing your eyes is safe, do it now. If you are driving or operating machinery, save this message and return to it when you can give it your full attention. What we are about to do requires your presence. Not passive listening, active engagement. With your eyes closed, I want you to become aware of your breathing. Not to change it, just to notice it. Feel the air entering through your nose. Feel your chest expand, Feel the brief pause at the top of the inhale, and then feel the release, the exhale, the letting go. Do that 3 times, 3 full breaths. And with each exhale, I want you to release one thing. The first exhale, release the doubt. The doubt that says, this is not for you. The doubt that says, your fog is permanent. The doubt that says, God has forgotten you. Let it go with the breath. The second exhale, release the guilt. The guilt of lost years. The guilt of diminished presence. The guilt of all the things you could not be for the people you love because your brain was not giving you access to the full version of yourself. That guilt served no one. Release it now. The third exhale, release the timeline. The human insistence that restoration should have happened sooner, that God is late, that the fog lasted too long. Release the timeline and accept the divine one. God is not late, God is precise. And the precision of this moment, this exact intersection of your readiness and His provision, is proof that the timeline has been perfect even when it felt unbearable. Now, with your eyes still closed, I want you to become aware of the space behind your forehead, not your thoughts, the space that contains your thoughts. Neuroscience identifies this region as the prefrontal cortex, the seat of executive function, the command center of your cognitive architecture. Under desynchronization, this region is underactive. It receives less blood flow, less oxygen, and less neural input than it was designed to receive. But right now, in this moment of intentional awareness, you are directing attention to it, and attention is the first step of activation. As you hold your awareness on that space, I want you to imagine a warmth beginning to spread from the center of your forehead, backward, toward the center of your brain. This is not imagination in the dismissive sense. This is directed neuroplasticity. The brain activates regions that receive focused attention. By holding your awareness on the prefrontal cortex and then tracing it backward, you are literally rehearsing the neural pathway that whole brain synchronization will strengthen. You are giving your brain a preview of its restored state. Hold that warmth. Let it expand. Feel it reaching toward the back of your skull, toward the visual cortex, toward the cerebellum. Feel the left and right hemispheres being bathed in the same warmth simultaneously. Not competing, cooperating, not divided. United. This is what your brain was designed to feel like. This is the state that was stolen from you, and this is the state that is being returned to you beginning July 20th. Now open your eyes and notice something. In the 60 seconds you spent in that exercise, something shifted. You may not be able to name it yet, but something is different. The noise in your head is slightly quieter. Your breathing is slightly deeper. Your awareness is slightly broader. That shift, as small as it may seem, is evidence. Evidence that your brain responds to directed attention. Evidence that the desynchronization is not permanent. Evidence that the mechanism of restoration is already active within you, waiting not for external intervention but for internal permission. You just gave it permission, and it responded. That is what the full protocol does, amplified, sustained, and neurologically optimized to a degree that a 60-second exercise cannot achieve on its own. I want to speak directly to the chosen ones who felt resistance during that exercise. The ones whose minds would not quiet. The ones who could not close their eyes without anxiety spiking. The ones whose internal narrator kept interrupting with skepticism or distraction or a grocery list. That resistance is not evidence of your failure. That resistance is evidence of the depth of your desynchronization. A brain that cannot quiet for 60 seconds is a brain that desperately needs what is being offered. Not because something is wrong with you, because something was done to you. And the resistance you felt is the suppression fighting to maintain its hold on the only territory it has left, your attention. The suppression knows that your attention is the gateway. If it can keep your attention fragmented, scattered, reactive, it can prevent the restoration from taking root. Every notification on your phone, every algorithmic rabbit hole, every manufactured urgency that pulls your attention away from the present moment is the suppression reinforcing its architecture. Not through conspiracy, through design. The attention economy was not built to steal your attention. It was built to prevent the kind of sustained, focused, directed attention that triggers neurological restoration. The result is the same, regardless of intent. Your attention has been colonized, and the decolonization of your attention is the first act of your restoration. July 20th is the day you take your attention back, not through willpower, through neurological intervention. The 8-minute protocol does not require you to fight for focus. It creates the conditions under which focus naturally reasserts itself. It is not a discipline, it is a liberation. And liberation from attentional colonization is perhaps the most revolutionary act a chosen one can perform in the modern era. Because when your attention is restored, everything changes. Your prayer life changes because you can sustain the depth of connection that shallow attention prevented. Your relationships change because you can hold space for another person without your mind drifting to the 14 things competing for your cognitive bandwidth. Your creativity changes because creative insight requires the kind of lateral, associative, whole brain processing that desynchronization blocks. Your purpose clarity changes because you can finally hear the quiet voice beneath the noise, the voice that has been speaking your assignment since before you were born, the voice that the fog turned into a whisper and the restoration will return to a roar. And I want you to notice that the voice has not stopped speaking. Even through the fog, even through the years of diminished capacity, even through the suppression, the voice persisted. It whispered when it could not roar. It nudged when it could not direct. It sent dreams you could not fully interpret, and intuitions you could not fully trust, and longings you could not fully explain. All of that was the voice, working within the constraints the fog imposed, communicating through the only channels the suppression left open. And on July 20th, every channel reopens simultaneously. Chosen one, we are entering the sacred closing of this message. Everything that has been spoken up to this point has been preparation. Preparation of your mind. Preparation of your understanding. Preparation of your neurological and spiritual architecture for what is about to be declared over your life. Declarations are not wishes. Declarations are not affirmations in the modern self-help sense. Declarations are acts of alignment. When you declare something in agreement with what God has already ordained, you are not creating reality, you are consenting to it. You are removing the final barrier between what has been prepared for you and your willingness to receive it. The barrier has always been consent. God will not override your free will. He will not force restoration on a person who has chosen fog. He will not synchronize a brain that has decided desynchronization is safer. The entire architecture of divine provision is built on invitation, not imposition. You have been invited. This entire message, from the first word to this moment, has been an extended invitation. And the response is yours to give. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel more ready. Not when the circumstances align in a way your foggy brain considers sufficient. Now, in this sacred window, in this convergence that was designed for exactly this exchange between creator and created. Before we enter the declaration, I want to acknowledge something. I know that some of you listening right now are in the darkest season of your life. I know that the fog is not an abstract concept for you. It is the thing that made you cry in the car this morning. It is the thing that made you snap at your child last night. It is the thing that made you stare at a blank screen for an hour today, unable to produce the work you know you are capable of. It is the thing that made you wonder, quietly, in a place you do not show anyone, whether you can keep going. I see you. God sees you. And this message reached you not because an algorithm suggested it. This message reached you because a father who sees his child struggling sent the exact frequency of truth needed to penetrate the fog at its thickest point. You are not alone in this. You are not the only chosen one in fog. There are millions, and many of them are listening right now, in this exact moment, with the same tears, the same doubts, the same desperate hope that this time, this message, this moment will be different. It will be different, not because I am saying it, because the date is set, because the restoration is ordained, because the convergence of July 20th through the 22nd was placed on the divine calendar before you were born, and no amount of fog, no depth of suppression, no intensity of doubt can change what God scheduled before the foundations of the world were spoken into existence. I want you to prepare your environment for the next few minutes. If there are distractions around you, minimize them. If you are in a noisy place, find a quieter corner. If there are people nearby who might interrupt, let them know that you need a few moments of uninterrupted space. What is about to be spoken over your life deserves your full attention. Not because the words are magic, because the alignment they create is real. And alignment, like any act of precision, requires stillness. Become still now. Let the noise of the world fade. Let the urgency of your to-do list release its grip. Let the anxiety about tomorrow dissolve into the certainty of what is being established right now. For the next few minutes, there is nothing more important than what is happening right here, between you and the voice that has been speaking your name since before time began, between the fog you have known and the clarity you are about to receive, between the old cognitive architecture and the new one that God is installing as you listen. I declare over your life, in the name of the God who marked you before you drew your first breath, that the fog is lifting, not gradually, not partially, completely. I declare that the cognitive suppression that has defined your adult experience is being dismantled, synapse by synapse, pathway by pathway, hemisphere by hemisphere, beginning now and accelerating through the convergence window of July 20th through the 22nd. I declare that every year of diminished capacity is being redeemed, not erased, redeemed, which means the wisdom you gained through the fog, the resilience you built under suppression, the compassion you developed through struggle, all of it remains. But it is now being paired with the cognitive clarity it was always meant to operate alongside. I declare that your brain is being returned to its original specifications. The specifications God designed before the world had a chance to corrupt them. The left hemisphere and the right hemisphere are no longer adversaries competing for dominance. They are partners, collaborating on every thought, every decision, every prayer, every creative impulse, every relational interaction. The synchronization that was your birthright and was stolen by a world that could not afford your full activation is being reinstated. And no force, no system, no pattern, no principality can reverse what God has decided to restore. I declare that your vision is being restored. The prospective cognition that allows you to see your future with clarity and move toward it with confidence. The strategic capacity that allows you to make decisions from wisdom rather than anxiety. The creative vision that allows you to see solutions where others see only obstacles. The relational vision that allows you to perceive the people in your life, not just as they are, but as they are becoming. All of it is coming back online. All of it is being activated. All of it is yours. I declare that the guilt you have carried about the fog years is dissolved, completely, permanently. The years the locusts have eaten are being restored, and the restoration includes a full pardon for every moment you blamed yourself for what was never your fault. You did not choose the fog. You survived it. And survival under cognitive suppression is not a failure to be ashamed of. It is a testimony to the resilience God built into your design. You are not forgiven because you were guilty. You are released because you were innocent. And the release is effective immediately. I declare that the people connected to your life are being prepared for the fullness of your emergence. Your children are being prepared to receive a fully present parent. Your partner is being prepared to meet the complete version of the person they committed to. Your colleagues are being prepared to encounter a mind operating at a capacity they have never witnessed. Your community is being prepared for the impact of a chosen one who is no longer foggy, no longer reactive, no longer diminished, but fully restored, fully synchronized, fully dangerous to every mediocre system that depends on your cognitive compliance. I declare these things not as hopes, not as wishes, not as possibilities contingent on your performance, or your worthiness, or your ability to earn what is being given. I declare them as facts, as certainties, as outcomes that have already been decided in the courts of heaven and are now manifesting in the timeline of earth. The only variable is your consent. And if you are still listening, your consent has already been given. Because the fog does not let people listen this long. Only the Spirit does. And your spirit has been saying yes since the moment this message began. I declare over your finances that the fog-induced paralysis that has kept you in cycles of scarcity and missed opportunity is ending. A synchronized brain perceives opportunity that a desynchronized brain walks past without noticing. The financial breakthrough you have been praying for is not waiting for external conditions to change. It is waiting for your cognitive capacity to perceive what has been in front of you all along. The provision has already been positioned. Your brain simply could not see it through the fog. When the fog lifts, the provision becomes visible. And when the provision becomes visible, the action becomes obvious. And when the action becomes obvious, the breakthrough becomes inevitable. I declare over your health that the stress architecture that has been degrading your body through chronic cortisol elevation, through disrupted sleep, through the systematic suppression of your parasympathetic nervous system, is being dismantled. Whole brain synchronization has a documented effect on the autonomic nervous system. It shifts the body from chronic sympathetic activation, the fight or flight state that most modern humans live in permanently, to parasympathetic balance, the rest and restore state that allows healing, regeneration, and cellular repair. Your body has been waiting for your brain to give it permission to heal. That permission is being granted. I declare over your spiritual life that the ceiling you have felt in your prayer, the glass wall between your words and the heavens, the sense that your prayers were being spoken into a void, all of it was a symptom of cognitive desynchronization, not spiritual disconnection. You were never disconnected from God. Your receiver was compromised. And a compromised receiver does not mean the signal stopped. It means you could not process it. The signal has been constant. The downloads have been continuous. The guidance has been uninterrupted. You simply could not hear it clearly enough to act on it with confidence. When the synchronization is restored, the spiritual bandwidth returns. And everything God has been saying to you during the fog years, everything you sensed but could not fully interpret, becomes clear. Not new revelation. Accumulated revelation. Stacked, stored, waiting for the cognitive capacity to process it all. Imagine years of divine instruction suddenly becoming accessible in a single season of clarity. That is what awaits you. I declare over your identity that you are not who the fog told you that you were. The fog told you that you were limited. You are limitless. The fog told you that you were average. You are exceptional. The fog told you that you were falling behind. You were being positioned. The fog told you that the best years were behind you. The best years could not begin until the fog was lifted, and the lifting is happening now, which means the best years are not behind you. They are ahead of you. Every single one of them, starting July 20th, starting with the convergence that was written into the fabric of time with your name on it. You are a chosen one, not by your choice, by the choice of the one who sees the end from the beginning and decided, before you existed, that you were worth choosing. That choice was not contingent on your performance. It was not earned by your behavior. It was not a reward for your faithfulness. It was a declaration of your identity. And identity, once declared by God, cannot be revoked by fog, diminished by suppression, or invalidated by the years you spent unable to walk in it. You are chosen. You have always been chosen. And the convergence of July 20th through the 22nd is not God choosing you for the first time. It is God making visible what has been true since before time began. Now I want to ask you to do something, and I want you to understand that this is not a performance. This is not a ritual designed to make you feel something in the moment that fades by morning. This is an act of participation in your own restoration. I want you to speak out loud, not in your head, not in a whisper. Out loud, with the full resonance of your voice, the words that follow. Because spoken words create a different neurological event than thought words. Spoken declarations activate the motor cortex, the auditory cortex, and the prefrontal cortex simultaneously, creating a whole brain event that reinforces the very synchronization we have been discussing. Your voice is not just communicating the declaration. Your voice is participating in the restoration. Every syllable you speak is a neuron firing in alignment with your original design. Say this: I am a chosen one. Say it again, slower this time. I am a chosen one. Feel the weight of each word. Feel the truth of it, settling into a place deeper than intellect, deeper than belief, into the bedrock of identity where nothing the fog has said can reach. Now say this: the fog is lifting. My brain is being restored. My hemispheres are synchronizing. My vision is returning. My clarity is expanding. My purpose is being revealed. And no force on earth can stop what God has started in me. If you said those words out loud, something shifted in your chest. A warmth, a pressure, a feeling that is difficult to name but impossible to deny. That is not emotion. That is resonance. The frequency of truth, vibrating against the frequency of your identity and producing harmony. That harmony is what your brain was designed to operate in. And every time you speak truth over your life, you are reinforcing the neural pathways that sustain it. You are not just saying words. You are building architecture, cognitive architecture that supports the restoration instead of resisting it. I want to give you one more declaration, and this one is specific to the convergence window. This one is calibrated to the exact 3 days that have been marked on the divine calendar with your name. Say this out loud. On July 20th, I will be ready. On July 21st, I will be receiving. On July 22nd, I will be transformed. Not because I am worthy enough, because God is faithful enough. Not because I earned this, because He ordained it. Not because the fog is gone, because the fog no longer has authority over my brain, my identity, my future, or my story. Its lease has expired. Its tenure is over. And the eviction is final. If you are crying right now, let the tears come. Do not fight them. Do not apologize for them. Do not minimize them as sentimentality. Tears, during spiritual and neurological activation, are documented. They are the body response to a system-wide recalibration. The tears are not weakness. The tears are evidence. Evidence that something deep inside you recognizes the truth of what is being spoken and is releasing the accumulated grief of years spent in a state you were never designed to endure. Let the tears wash through. They are carrying out the residue of the fog. They are making room for what comes next. What comes next is the most important part, because declarations without follow-through become memories, and memories fade. And faded memories cannot sustain transformation. The follow-through is not complicated. It is not a 12-step program. It is not a discipline that requires willpower you do not currently have. The follow-through is a single decision made once that sets the restoration in motion and allows the convergence window to do its full work in your life. That decision is the decision to accept the provision that God has placed in your path, not to earn it, not to qualify for it, not to negotiate its terms or question its timing, to accept it. The way you accept rain, the way you accept sunrise, the way you accept the next breath entering your lungs without questioning whether you deserve air, not because you deserve it, because it was given. And gifts do not require worthiness. They require open hands. Open your hands now. What has been prepared for you is ready to be received. Chosen one, if this message has spoken to you, if you felt the fog shift even slightly while listening, if something in you recognized the truth beneath the science and the spirit, I need you to do 3 things right now, not later, not when you remember, not when the moment feels right. Right now, while the resonance is still active in your nervous system, while the declarations are still reverberating through the neural pathways they just activated, while the warmth in your chest has not yet been replaced by the cold familiarity of routine. First, leave a comment below. Not for me, for yourself. Write the words, "I am ready," or write what you felt during the declaration, or write the date, July 20th, as a stake in the ground. A public declaration of your private transformation. When you write it, something neurological happens. The act of translating an internal experience into external language activates a circuit that solidifies intention into commitment. Researchers call this the generation effect. Information that is generated by the individual, rather than passively received, is retained at significantly higher rates and produces stronger motivational states. Your comment is not just text on a screen. It is a cognitive anchor, a reference point your brain will return to when the fog tries to reassert its narrative. It is the difference between thinking about going to the gym and telling someone you will be there at 6 in the morning. The comment is, "You're 6 in the morning. Write it now while the truth is louder than the doubt." Second, share this message with one person who needs to hear it. You know who they are. You thought of them at least twice while listening, maybe 3 times. The person in your life who is in their own fog. The person who has been struggling and does not know why. The person whose potential you can see even when they cannot see it themselves. The person who used to burn so bright and has been dimming for years and blaming themselves for the darkness. Share this message with them. Not because sharing helps my reach, because sharing is an act of love. And an act of love, performed from a place of emerging clarity, is one of the most powerful things a chosen one can do. You are not just sharing a message. You are extending an invitation, the same invitation that was extended to you today. And the person you share it with may be one decision, one moment of recognition, one spark of hope, away from their own restoration. Do not underestimate the power of being the person who passes the torch. The fog survives in isolation. It dissolves in connection. Third, press the like button. I know that sounds small compared to the magnitude of what we have discussed today. Compared to brain restoration and divine timing and hemisphere synchronization, a small button on a screen seems insignificant. But there is a reason I am asking, and the reason matters. Every like signals to the system that distributes messages like this one that this content matters, that people are being helped by it, that it should be shown to more people who are searching for exactly this kind of truth in the middle of their own fog. The like is not vanity. The like is strategy, spiritual strategy. It is your way of ensuring that the next chosen one in fog, the one who has not heard this message yet, the one who is scrolling through their feed at 2 in the morning wondering if God has forgotten them, has a chance to find it. Your like is their lifeline. Your small action creates their large discovery. Press it now. Those 3 actions, the comment, the share, the like, take less than 60 seconds combined. But they create a ripple that extends far beyond this moment and far beyond your individual story. They anchor your restoration in action. They connect you to a community of chosen ones who are waking up simultaneously across the world. and they position this message to reach the people who need it most, the ones still deep in the fog, the ones who have not yet heard that July 20th through the 22nd was marked for their emergence. You are not just a recipient of this message, you are a carrier. And carriers do not hoard what they have been given. They distribute it, freely, generously, with the same urgency and love that brought it to them in their hour of greatest need. Chosen one, as we close this message, I want to leave you with a blessing. Not a casual goodbye. Not a formulaic sign-off that you have heard 1,000 times and forgotten 1,001. A blessing in the original sense of the word. A transmission of power from the one who speaks to the one who receives. A declaration that carries weight beyond its syllables. Because the authority behind it is not human, it is divine. It is ancient. And it is specific to you, in this moment, on this day, in this exact configuration of readiness that you have achieved by listening this far. May the God who marked you before the foundations of the world continue to mark you. May his mark be visible, not just in the spiritual realm, but in the cognitive one. May it manifest in the clarity of your thoughts, the depth of your perception, the speed of your processing, the richness of your creativity, and the steadiness of your emotional regulation. May the convergence of July 20th through the 22nd find you ready, open, and positioned for the fullness of what has been prepared. Not partially positioned, fully positioned. Standing at the exact intersection of divine timing and human receptivity, where miracles are not requested but received. May the fog that has defined your cognitive experience for years dissolve with the same completeness and finality with which morning dissolves darkness. Not slowly, not partially, not leaving residual patches that linger in the corners of your mind. Fully. May every neural pathway that was degraded by desynchronization be rebuilt stronger than it was before the degradation. May your brain be returned to the specifications of its original design and then exceed them. Because the God who restores does not restore to baseline. He restores to overflow. May your hemispheres synchronize with a precision that surprises even you. May your prefrontal cortex receive the blood flow and the neural input it was designed to process. May your working memory expand to hold the vision God has for your life in its entirety, not in fragments, not in glimpses, but in the full panoramic scope that a synchronized brain is capable of perceiving. May your relationships be restored to the depth they were designed to hold. May your children experience a fully present parent for the first time in their memory, and may that experience reshape their own neural development in ways that echo for generations. May your partner encounter the complete version of the person they chose to build a life with, and may the encounter feel like a second beginning. May every person in your orbit feel the shift that happens when a chosen one moves from fog to clarity, from suppression to sovereignty, from diminished capacity to full cognitive and spiritual activation. May your finances reflect the restored vision that allows you to perceive opportunities the fog hid from you. May your health reflect the neurological recalibration that shifts your body from chronic stress response to parasympathetic balance. May your spiritual life reflect the restored bandwidth that allows you to hear, receive, and act on every download God has been sending during the fog years, downloads that accumulated without being processed and now become available all at once, like a dam, releasing years of stored water into a field that has been waiting to bloom. May you walk into July 20th with expectation. May you walk through July 21st with reception. May you emerge on July 22nd, transformed. Not into someone new, into the someone you always were. The someone the fog buried. The someone the world tried to suppress. The someone God has been protecting, preserving, and preparing for this exact moment in human history. You were chosen for this time. You were marked for this season. You were preserved through the fog for this emergence. And nothing, not the world, not the system, not the suppression, not the doubt, not the years of diminished capacity. Nothing can stop what God has set in motion for your life. Go in peace. Go in clarity. Go in the absolute certainty that what begins on July 20th does not end on the 22nd. It begins on the 22nd. The convergence is the ignition. What follows is the journey of a fully restored chosen one, walking in the fullness of their design for the first time. And that journey, chosen one, is the most beautiful thing you will ever experience. Until we meet again in another message, in another moment of divine timing, remember this: the fog was never who you were. It was what was done to you. And what was done is being undone. Starting now, starting here, starting with the breath you are taking at this very moment. You are marked. You are chosen. You are restored. God bless you, chosen one, deeply, completely, irreversibly.